Tuesday, June 3rd. This is a joint committee of the Committee on Finance and Special Committee on Gun Violence. I understand that state law currently requires that the following announcement be made at the beginning of every remote public hearing as follows. Due to the current public health emergency, City Council committees are currently meeting remotely. We're using Microsoft Teams to make these remote hearings possible. Instructions on how the public may view and offer public testimony at public hearings of council committees are included in the public hearing notices that are published in the Daily News, Inquirer, and Legal Intelligentsia prior to the hearings, and can be found on phlcouncil.com. Modesto from Microphone Check, is my sound okay?
Yes, your sound sounds good. Let me just double check with the court reporter. How's that sound, Tania?
The council member was clear.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. I note that the hour has come. Mr. Iannuzzi, will you please call the roll to take attendance? Members that are in attendance, will you please indicate that you are present when your name is called, and say a few brief words to indicate your response so that your image will be displayed on screen when you speak.
Councilmember Cindy Bass.
Good morning. I am present. Good morning.
Councilmember Alan Dom.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and colleagues. I'm present.
Councilmember Helen Gim.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and council colleagues. I am present.
Councilmember Bobby Heenan.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, and good morning, colleagues.
Councilmember Mark Squilla.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and colleagues. I'm present.
Chair of the Special Committee, Kenyatta Johnson.
Present.
And Chair Derek Green.
Present. Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Iannuzzi. A quorum of these committees is present, and this hearing is now called to order. This is a public hearing of the Joint Committees on Finance and Special Committee on Gun Violence regarding resolution number 210169. Mr. Iannuzzi, will you please read the title of the resolution?
Resolution number 210169, authorizing the Committees on Finance and on Gun Violence Prevention to hold joint hearings regarding the connection between poverty, gun violence, and systemic racism in Philadelphia.
Thank you, Mr. Iannuzzi. Before we begin to hear testimony from the witnesses we have for today, everyone who has been invited to this meeting to testify should be aware that the public hearing is being recorded. Because the hearing is public, participants and viewers have no reasonable expectation of privacy. By continuing to be in this meeting, you are consenting to being recorded. Additionally, prior to recognizing members for questions or comments they have for witnesses, I will note for the record at this time that we will use the chat feature available in Microsoft Teams to allow members to signify that they wish to be recognized. In order to comply with the Sunshine Act, the chat feature must only be used for this purpose by members of council. Mr. Iannuzzi, will you please call the first panel of witnesses that we have to testify this morning?
Michael Rashid, Director of the Department of Commerce, City of Philadelphia. Erica Atwood, Senior Director of the Office of Policy and Strategic Initiatives for Criminal Justice and Public Safety, City of Philadelphia. Bilal Abdul Qayyum, President and Executive Director, the Father's Day Rally Committee, Incorporated.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, before we begin, I'd like to recognize Council Member Johnson for some opening comments.
Yeah, thank you very much. Mr. Chair, first and foremost, I just want to thank you for your leadership in calling this hearing so we can begin looking at the root causes of why we have gun violence plaguing the streets of the city of Philadelphia. And really, a lot of times we approach this from a law enforcement standpoint with our district attorney, our police commissioner, probation, parole, and our courts. but you have stepped up to the plate and have taken a unique approach to allow us to begin looking at the root causes of why our communities are in the conditions that they are in. Rather it's from the years of lack of investment in our public school system, rather it's from the years of investment into the economic development of our small businesses in our neighborhoods, rather it's years of investment in supporting our young people. This gives us an opportunity to reimagine gun violence prevention. And so I just want to say I salute you for taking this unique approach. We know that from statistics, in areas of high poverty, there's high crime and high violence. And so this is an opportunity for us to address this from a paradigm shift as we go forward toward the future. And so first and foremost, I just want to acknowledge you for your hard work and thank you. And I look forward to hearing all of the panelists who are participating today. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnson. And to follow up on that point, I would be remiss in not thanking Mr. Bilal Qayyum for actually introducing this concept, this connection between both the issues of gun violence and economic development. Many people know Bilal's work in reference to Father's Day Rally Committee, but others may not be as familiar with his work as a member of the city's Commerce Department for a number of years. So he brings a unique connection, both in what I would say his 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. career, but also 5 p.m. to 9 p.m., if not later, work in trying to address gun violence. And this connection is something that I know I've seen through various aspects of my own personal career, from working in banking as also being in the district attorney's office some years ago. So this issue, as Councilmember Johnson talked about, of the connection between the increase in gun violence and then the lack of economic development, is something that's been here in this city. Too often we talk about these issues in silos. Well, if you focus on gun violence or public safety, this is your platform, or this is your portfolio of work. If you're someone that works on economic development or business development or trying to provide equity for Black and brown businesses, then your portfolio of work is over here. When all of these issues are interconnected, and I think it's more and more we as members of council and the public are trying to move beyond the various silos that people put us in, or sometimes we ourselves put ourselves in, and try and look at these things in a comprehensive, collective way. In preparation for this hearing, we've also had some outreach to both Pew Charitable Trusts as well as the A&E Casey Foundation for them to provide some real research on these issues. I've had conversations with them. So this is the first step in this conversation. We look forward to having additional conversations from a more academic approach, possibly, regarding looking at this issue. We want to start this conversation now, especially as we are going into the summer months, coming out of the pandemic, and the concern that we have in reference to public safety, especially regarding gun violence as we go into the summer, but also looking at the opportunity of the resources that have come to the city from the American Rescue Plan. And we saw what the pandemic did to Black and brown businesses in the city of Philadelphia and across this nation. But here specifically in the city of Philadelphia, and many people are familiar with the statistics regarding Black and brown businesses, where we only have 6% of the businesses with employees are owned by African Americans, and only 4% of businesses with employees are owned by people of Hispanic descent. And that's from the U.S. Census Bureau. So that gives an indication of the connection between these issues and concerns. I look forward to this conversation this morning and ongoing conversations as we look to address this concern and issue in a more holistic way to address this systemic problem that's plagued our city. With that, we're going to call our first panel. Mr. Iannuzzi has given you the names of our first panelists. We will start in this order. We'll start with Mr. Bilal Qayyum, then our Commerce Director, Michael Rashid, and then we'll conclude the first panel with Ms. Erica Atwood, the Senior Director of the Office of Policy and Strategic Initiatives for Criminal Justice and Public Safety for our city.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Can I be recognized as present?
Yes. And I see Councilmember Jamie Gauthier is also here. Please thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. And if
Good
you
morning.
can just state your name for the record, and then please proceed with your testimony.
Yes, I am Bilal Khayyam, President of the Father's Day Rally Committee. Good morning, members of City Council. And I want to give a special acknowledgement to Councilman Derek Green and Councilman Kenyatta Johnson for taking this the leadership to start this discussion in the city of Philadelphia, facing what I believe is a major issue that's going to stop the city from moving forward, and that is addressing the issue of how white institutional racism is affecting the city and its movement forward for all the citizens in the city. It is very interesting that today's hearing is being held the same week that we're nationally looking at what happened in Tulsa and the burning down of Wall Street 100 years ago. And in America trying to figure out what is the next steps in our society to address racial divide in our country. We in Philadelphia, if you remember 1 year ago, had to address this issue after the killing of George Floyd and the uprising that was taking place in Philadelphia, but also across the country. And then later after George Floyd, the murder of Walter Wallace by the Philadelphia police. Racial tension in Philadelphia still exists just 1 year after the uprising, but most folks in leadership, in my opinion, have failed to address it in open forums. But today, council has taken a bold move to start the conversation in the public forum. So I hope today's hearing will begin to lead, at least for us to agree as citizens that racism has to be addressed in the city of Philadelphia for the city to move forward. During my lifetime, I have witnessed and seen racism firsthand. From my days when I was growing up in West Philly, when I attended Shoemaker Junior High School, and a white teacher told me that I should be in the general studies and not in academics because she didn't feel I could handle the workload of being in academic classes. Also, I used to play basketball when I was growing up. And one of the playgrounds we used to want to go to is Tuscan Playground, which is at 59th and Lancaster Avenue. And we would be run home every other day if we go play basketball by the white youth because they didn't want us in the neighborhoods. And when I attended Overbrook High School, Overbrook was 50% black and 50% white. Whites would go out one door of the building and blacks would go out the other door of the building. And then as I moved on and went to college down south, and I was in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I went to Charlotte University. I used to visit my brother who went to Durham, who was at North Carolina Central in Durham, North Carolina. And I used to go down the strip. It's almost like if you could vision up your mind from going from Philadelphia to Atlantic City, that long Atlantic City Expressway. Well, I was driving down on that expressway. I saw 15 cars parked on the side of the expressway, and I saw these individuals in white hoods. And what was happening was they were KKK. They were getting ready to organize to do a rally outside of Durham, North Carolina. So I'm saying all that to say that we have to deal with this issue about racism. An effect of, as Councilman Johnson said, of the connection between racism in the city of Philadelphia, locking individuals out, as well as trying to deal with the violence. Racism in America has been held in places by public policy that evolved over the years by slavery, sharecropping, Jim Crow, redlining, mass incarceration, predatory subprime lending, and accepted. Also, I believe very strongly that white institutional racism in the city of Philadelphia has helped driving the level of black on black violence in this city. Nationally and locally, statistics shows that black men are jobless in Philadelphia. And Dr. Bernie Anderson, some of you well know, who's a major economist, basically gives me these numbers. 30% of black males in the city of Philadelphia are jobless. Up to 50% of black male youth are jobless. Councilman Johnson mentioned about only 6% of black business ownerships in the city of Philadelphia. The health disparities going on in the city, and lack of job opportunities in the public sector and private sector help leads to that a lot of young males in particular, and young women as well, the hopelessness and lack of self-respect for themselves. If you look at, there's 3 reports that was done. One from the health department called the Brotherly Love, Health, and Black Males and Boys in Philadelphia. In that report, it's a report about the disparity between black males, particularly, and black boys compared to every other ethnic group around the health issues. Look at the report that the city has issued, the 2020 City of Philadelphia Workforce, excuse me one second, Diversity Profile and Annual Report about how the lack of leadership position in the county administrations for black individuals. And also look at the City Commerce Report. I know we have Michael Rashid on. Look at their report on economy's opportunity report about the lack of or dropping in black-owned businesses getting city contracts. So I'm saying when a person is locked out of inclusion and opportunities, that person becomes a walking time bomb that can blow up at any moment. And in most instances in the city of Philadelphia, that person is a walking time bomb is a black male. That's why shootings and homicides in Philadelphia, the major cause is arguments. It's argument related because people are uptight. So let me end by saying I'm giving a challenge to City Council today to think boldly and take on this issue and come up with solutions and policies to change and help close the loopholes regarding that were being caused by racism in the city of Philadelphia. And yes, I understand very clearly that a person's heart, we can't change a person's heart or what they feel, but council can surely can change and strike at a structure underpinning of racism in public space by developing initiatives and public policy that will change the effect of some racism in the city of Philadelphia, and particularly as it relates to trying to solve the violence problem in the city of Philadelphia. So with that statement, Councilman Green, I thank you once again and the members of council for allowing me to open up this session in the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Fayum. I'd like to acknowledge that we're also been joined by Councilmember Kendra Brooks. Did not know that you attended Shaw University, and you also made reference to an institution close to my heart, North Carolina Central, where my wife attended. So she's always reminding me of how well the Eagles do in a lot of different areas. But when she talks about Eagles, she's talking about North Carolina Central, not Philadelphia Eagles. So with that, I'd like to then, we'll have questions for Mr. Fayum and other members of this panel. Next, we'll hear from Mr. Michael Rashid, our Commerce Director, and then Ms. Erica Atwood.
Good morning, members of the committees on finance and on gun violence prevention. My name is Michael Rashid, and I'm the Director of Commerce for the City of Philadelphia. I'm here to provide testimony on Resolution 200169 regarding the connection between poverty, gun violence, and systematic racism in Philadelphia. The responsibility for reducing gun violence cannot be put on a single program or initiative. Every agency, every business has a role to play. The public health system must be involved. The school system must be involved. Obviously, the police must be involved. Even early child care centers must be involved in reducing gun violence. The business community, especially since it controls access to jobs, wage rates, access to training programs, new business locations, and much more. The business community plays a gigantic role in helping to reduce gun violence. And investments in equity and justice for everyone will pay off for everyone, including payoff for the business community. You know, the young people have a slogan and where they say, no justice, no peace. More and more, our friends in the business community in Philadelphia are coming to understand a similar phrase, and that is no justice, no profits. As the city is more and more safe, businesses will have more and more customers. As they have more and more customers, we would expect that their profits would increase. As incomes rise, as more and more people have fair wages and they're able to build up their wealth, customers will have more money to spend and business profits will rise. So economic justice for all is a good business tactic, and the prevention of any kind of violence, especially gun violence, will help businesses make more money. My friend, Ms. Erica Atwood, is going to talk to you in a few minutes, and she says a lot of times the following statement. She says that investments, we should build coalitions to work for investments to help people who built this country for free, did not get a paid a penny for 300 years to build our country. And we should make investments in those people. And if we do so, we will have more economic justice in our society. That's a message that truly resonates with me, and our Commerce Department takes that message to the business community. For too many young people in our city, opportunity feels scarce, and it feels out of reach. Their reality is that the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. They see the party and they hear the music, but they did not get an invitation. They feel excluded and they feel isolated. And that's a recipe for violence and social unrest. Here's how the Commerce Department seeks to change these things. First of all, we invest in places. We make meaningful investments to sustain commercial corridors in our neighborhoods. Commercial corridors such as Germantown Avenue, Woodland Avenue, Girard Avenue, North 22nd Street, 52nd Street, Kensington and Allegheny, and many more. All have benefited from streetscape enhancements, storefront improvements, and more. The work we do on commercial corridors is based on relationships. In 2020 alone, our business services managers provided one-on-one support to almost 12,000 businesses. Commerce targets 90 commercial corridors and funds 48 community-based organizations. We promote economic development by renovating commercial properties. We connect businesses with city programs and technical assistance. We help businesses connect with their communities. Ownership creates neighborhood stability and community wealth. We use federal funds to support acquisition loan programs. We will be directing proceeds from the Neighborhood Preservation Initiative to support grants for business owners looking to purchase buildings. The Commerce Department also invests in people. Every year, our team connects with thousands of businesses of all sizes. We serve as a broker, connecting the dots between businesses who need employees and motivated employees. During the last 18 months, we connected 7,000 employees to 189 companies looking to locate or retain their locations in our city. We can do better. Commerce finances the building of talent pipelines that connect residents to high-growth industries like life sciences and advanced manufacturing. We train Philadelphians as part of the PHL Taking Care of Business program to connect returning citizens to employment through the Fair Chance Hiring Initiative. We see entrepreneurship as a growth and wealth building strategy. Self-employment is the right fit for many Philadelphians, and we establish entrepreneurship as a career option and a pathway out of poverty. Finally, the Commerce Department facilitates collaboration and accountability among the city's large corporations and institutions. Our job is not done until we can leverage the billions of dollars in public and private sector resources to create economic justice for our communities. We take our mission very seriously, and we look forward to working with the council to make violence prevention a top priority for all institutions in our great city. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have for me.
Thank you, Mr. Rashid. Ms. Atwood?
Good day, Chair Green and Chair Johnson, as well as members of the Finance Committee and Special Committee on Gun Violence Prevention. I am Erica Atwood, Senior Director for the Office of Policy and Strategic Initiatives for Criminal Justice and Public Safety. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today on resolution number 210169. On the heels of the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa Massacre, today I give context to the relationship of structural violence, specifically poverty and the lack of economic opportunity, to the literal violence we see that plague our neighborhoods daily. As you may recall, in the Roadmap to Safer Communities, we laid out that gun violence in Philadelphia is largely concentrated in communities that also experience structural violence. Structural violence refers to harm that individuals, families, and communities experience from economic and social structures that prevent them from meeting basic needs. This includes social institutions, relationships of power, privilege, inequality, and inequity. I would argue that gun violence isn't the core problem, it is a symptom. It is a symptom of historical divestment and structural racism, specifically in Black communities, that has existed for generations. The neighborhoods that are most vulnerable to gun violence are where young Black men and boys live. These communities have experienced decades of discrimination and lack of investment, shutting them out of opportunities. Businesses, banks, and government agencies have often chosen not to invest in Black communities. Black Philadelphians account for 44% of the city's population, yet only 5% of small employer businesses. Gun violence data shows a correlation between neighborhoods with concentrated poverty and concentrated community violence. In these neighborhoods, schools may not have the resources they need, or infrastructure, including housing and roads, may have fallen in disrepair. Businesses have been closed or denied funds required to keep up with community needs. Banks may not operate, forcing community members to rely on more expensive payday lenders or check cashing businesses. Low graduation rates and high incarceration rates contribute to an unemployment rate for Black males at roughly 13%. That is more than double the white male unemployment rate. Generational unemployment that affects Black men may also mean that young people grow up without role models or social networks that could help them successfully access sustainable jobs and careers. A clear indicator of the simple fact that poverty and violent crime continue to afflict cities and communities across this country. The fact is especially true for Philadelphia, where the poverty rate has hovered at about 25% since the 2008 Great Recession, the highest among large cities in the U.S. according to the 2018 census, and where homicide rate is at the highest point since 2007. An actual study from 2007 compared neighborhoods with a median family income of about $12,000 with neighborhoods with a median family income of about $30,000 to evaluate the differences in socioeconomic impact and distress. Based on this data, characteristics of communities with a median income of $12,000 on average show nearly 54% of the families live below the poverty rate. 42% of households are on public assistance, and the unemployment rate is roughly around 30%. 35% of single-parent homes, translating to single-parent incomes, single-home incomes, and 6% have a bachelor's degree or higher. This data compared to communities with a median income of $30,000, which experience on average 11% of families living below the poverty rate, 10% of households on public assistance, 8% unemployment rate, 7% single-parent, single-income households, and 15% with a bachelor's degree or higher. Every day, young Black men and boys are working hard to put themselves on a path to success and well-being. They are attending and graduating from school, aspiring towards jobs and careers, and taking care of their families and communities. Unfortunately, all too often, they run the gauntlet of violence that cuts short their dreams and hopes. Homicide is homicides are the leading cause of death for young Black men and boys ages 15 to 24. Research shows their experience with violence, whether as a victim, a survivor, or a witness, sets them apart from nearly every other demographic group, including Black men over 24, white men, and Black women and girls. In addition to the devastating impact that young Black men themselves, violence inflicts trauma on entire families, neighborhoods, and the city. If we view participation in gun violence and crime through an economic lens, where individuals make decisions around illegal activity based on personal and social cost-benefit analysis, then changing the cost-benefit ratio for those at risk on the community and individual levels means improving economic mobility and making education, legal employment more valuable, which can outsize the impact of violence and crime. This means looking beyond traditional analysis of violent crime and digging deeper into the intersectionality between violence and other community-level indicators like poverty, education, community connectivity, blight, and health. By doing so, we will be better positioned to explore, implement, and evaluate targeted interventions and prevention tactics. One way of reducing violence is through disruption of neighborhood disadvantage and fully investing in these communities. Investments need to be aimed at beautification and business development so that economic mobility is not dependent on physical mobility. Workforce development programs are one example of interventions aimed at disrupting the cycle of poverty and have shown particularly strong efficacy in altering the cost-benefit assessments with the goal of reducing violent behavior. Studies from across the country and across diverse communities have shown how targeted workforce trainings have significant impacts on both younger, older, and previously incarcerated populations. Providing pathways to more and better opportunities has clearly been shown to interrupt patterns of economic disadvantage, thus interrupting the cycle of violence. To that end, smaller, community-based businesses play a critical role in the local workforce, accounting for 33% of the city's total employment. And while Black men and boys are disproportionately impacted by violence, increasingly research tells us that race is not a risk factor in violence. Structural racism is. That is why we must also focus on dismantling policies and practices that contribute to violence, such as discrimination in employment, lending, housing, policing, and unjust disciplinary practices in schools. We must also change the narrative and the perpetuation of negative perceptions of our young men and boys. Waging a war on gun violence isn't the answer. The answer is recognizing and restoring investments never made in people that built this country for free. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I'll be happy to respond to any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Atwood, Commerce Director Rashid, and Mr. Qayyum for today's testimony. It was interesting. Both Ms. Atwood and others have talked this week about the Greenwood section of Tulsa, Oklahoma, this being the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa massacre, and a number of people at a national level and even here locally have talked about Tulsa. It's interesting, and I know we're focusing here on the city of Philadelphia and the connection of gun violence, economic development, and systemic racism. When we look at Tulsa, you have a 1 in 16 chance of being a victim of violent crime or property crime in the city of Tulsa. It's identified as one of the more violent cities in America. But also, when you look at Tulsa from a population perspective, 34% African Americans who live in Tulsa live in poverty, compared to 13% of white Americans that live in Tulsa live in poverty. So you can make a direct connection of the lack of economic investment from the massacre of the Greenwood community of Tulsa to then, even when that community was rebuilt, you still had other dynamics of urban renewal that also continue to devastate and shrink the Greenwood District of Tulsa, and to where we are now in reference to economic development, poverty in that city. So I guess my first question is for any of the panelists, and well, let me focus specifically on Mr. Rashid. He talked about the PHL Taking Care of Business initiative and working with returning citizens, and also talking about the Fair Chance Hiring Initiative. Can you give some more perspective on how the Commerce Department has been working with either anti-violence or grassroots violence organizations like Mr. Quayum has been involved in over the years to really try to promote both the business community to hire more people who are returning citizens, and also the opportunities for entrepreneurship that those who are doing the grassroots anti-violence initiatives can then give the opportunity to provide those who are maybe starting to veer on a path that we don't want them to veer to, can see different perspectives of exposure to entrepreneurship.
Thank you, council member, for that question. I have members of my staff here on the line, and they can speak to it in detail. But let me just say, as I tried to indicate in my testimony, we see our role as connecting the dots. We're the dot connector, because we talk to businesses every day, from all types of businesses every day, and through our connection with various entities all over the city, whether it's the Community College of Philadelphia or all of the violence prevention initiatives, working with Miss Atwood and the many people that she works with. We find from them the types of programs that they are working with, and the types of people that they are working with. And so when we talk to employers say, I need this type of people, I need that type of person. We know where to go to bring those type of people to the table. We actually make grants to certain agencies to train people for specific jobs. Karen, you want to speak? Karen Fegler, you want to speak to that a little bit, or Heloise, if Heloise is on the line?
Good morning. Good morning, Council. Good morning. I can speak a little bit to the Fair Chance Hiring Initiative specifically. That is a initiative that is geared towards supporting returning citizens who want to work. But what it is, it's a way for us to incentivize employers, and mostly small and medium-sized businesses who are in need of talent and open to a diverse population to hire from. And our workforce team works with the employer, and then also with our workforce partners, and even some of the organizations that are community-based, to resource individuals to make sure that they are prepared and can and have the supports in place to be ready for work. So we work specifically to connect the employers who are incentivized, but we also have an incentive for the individuals, the returning citizens, to work. And these employers are prepared, they understand, they know what to do as far as flexibility and being sensitive to needs, and maybe a flexible schedule for our individuals, and they work together purposefully so that there are more opportunities for our returning citizen population to work. So that is the Fair Chance Hiring Initiative, which is specifically for returning citizens and small and medium-sized businesses located in Philadelphia.
And so let me ask this question to Ms. Atwood from a little different perspective in reference to the anti-violence initiative that you've been working on, and been working on from a macro strategic perspective. What has been, from your perspective, the engagement or the involvement of, either economic development, either through entrepreneurship, or other type of opportunities as a way to address and stem gun violence in the city?
So I think we're figuring out where the entree point for entrepreneurship is on a number of levels. Two in particular is, so as we're looking at entrepreneurs or small businesses as employers, how are we connecting those individuals who are interested in work and could be matched with those employers? And so how are we supporting that work of commerce? And there's also the notion of how are we cultivating and developing young people to be entrepreneurs? entrepreneurs. And so how are we saying, okay, well, you have this entrepreneurial spirit, you have this hustle drive. What are we doing with that? And how can we cultivate that in a way to make your idea make money and do it in a way so you can be your own boss? And so there is a younger generation of individuals that want to run their own ships. They want to chart their own course. And how are we are looking at ways that we can support them and give them the tools and capacity building they need to be their own, to chart their own destiny and chart their own course.
And then I have a question for Mr. Quayum from your perspective, and then I have one other question. I see Councilmember Dime also has a question as well. Mr. Quayum, from your perspective, what do you see as the need from the public sector, both from the commerce side as well as the anti-violence public safety perspective of how people in the community can better benefit and bring these type of service together? Because it seems like we're still at the starting stage, but we need to have a much deeper dive in making that connection to show someone that, you know, from the work you've done over the years, who's on the corner block, as some of those, as I use Ms. Atwood's phrase, hustle skills, to put that into an entrepreneurial venture that could help them and also help their community, as opposed to going into a different path. Ms. Quayum, I think you are on mute. There you go.
First of all, and I want to apologize if I speak out of turn on this, but I'm also chair of the Mayor's Commission on African American Males Economic Development Committee, and we have a proposal that we have submitted to the administration requesting. It's called the GAP Growth Advisory Program, where we will recruit Black males from coming out of the institutions as well as other locations. And the goal is to create 80 new Black businesses, Black male businesses per year. We have a curriculum. We have a partnership with the Business Center, which is you well aware of, Councilman Green, and also with the West Philadelphia Financial Institute in West Philly, and they changed their name to actually recruit and find young men who want to come off the corners, and young men that, a lot of them, that are looking for alternatives, which Ms. Atwood talked about the hustle, and put it into real businesses. So that is something that we are pursuing to get support from the administration on with this upcoming budget. The second thing is, I just think that there's what is constantly missing is this the connection. How do you connect the anti-violence groups with the city and the city's departments that are, let's say, the workforce development or commerce and other, and not only commerce, but with the larger white corporate community and in Philadelphia that should be and do a lot of hiring with the institutions in the city. How do you do that connection? I think it's a gap that still has to be addressed. And I know, in all fairness, to Erica, she's just been on board for a couple of months, and I understand that she's now working her best to begin to work a system to make that connection. And I think that's what it is. And you know, I'm big on, folks might not remember, but 14 years ago, I walked to Harrisburg under the banner, Jobs, Not Guns. So I'm always been a big component that give a guy, a woman a job, we're going to change their lifestyle. So I'm big on jobs. So I still think that there might be a disconnection between the anti-violence groups that I work with and the workforce development. But I know that it's beginning to have that conversation. And I know the council, and particularly with the leadership of President Clark, is beginning to have that conversation more and more. Is how do you connect workforce development agencies, Philadelphia Works and stuff, with the anti-violence groups to support them, to help do training and put them in jobs. And the last thing I just want to say on that Councilman, is that something has emerged lately that it's hard to deal with, but some guys we find out, or some folks, and it was not only the black folks, but across America now, don't want to work because they're getting money from the stimulus checks and all that, and all. I mean, that's why you got like Chickies and Pete's last week or 2 weeks ago had an ad. They need to hire 200 people, and they were hiring people on the spot, and that's across the spectrum. I'm pretty sure that Michael can talk about this, across the spectrum of all businesses in the city. So we got to address that issue as well, as how do folks who are getting income from other sources and not illegal sources, from legal sources, and they just don't want to work. So that's going to be another hurdle that we're going to have to address in the city as we move forward. All the businesses, all the restaurants in the city are crying for workers. But also I think we could take that and use that as our advantage for us, is we could get guys who, because the jobs are there. A lot of jobs are available now. So that could be to our advantage, is how do we grab these guys off the corners, do the first step to get the mindset right, that they're willing to want to change their lives, and then we help them with training, workforce development activities, and then tie them to get to jobs.
I have one final question, but before I go to my last question, I'm going to do a bit of housekeeping. Know that Reverend Greg Holston is also here. He's actually testifying on behalf of the District Attorney's Office. So after the question from Councilmember Dom and Councilmember Gim, we'll then hear Reverend Gregory Holston as a part of this panel, and we'll open it up for additional questions. But my last question, and Commerce Director Rashid, you made reference to life sciences in your testimony, and there was an article, I believe, 2 weeks ago about the growth of life sciences in the city of Philadelphia. And as we all know, Philadelphia is known as a city of eds and meds from an education and healthcare perspective. So life sciences provides a real opportunity for those who are coming out of University of Pennsylvania, Temple, Drexel, to get an opportunity for a research and development, family sustaining wage, but also for those who are not coming out of those institutions of higher learning, for those who receive certification or some other training coming out of our high schools, could also have the opportunity of getting a significant job at the family sustaining wage in the life sciences space as well. So the question I have, from that growth of that industry, which provides some real promise here in the city of Philadelphia and the region, and then looking at the anti-violence work that Ms. Atwood is talking about, and also what Mr. Quayum is talking about in reference to his work, how do we provide that exposure to those young people who are looking for different things, maybe thinking about going to college or maybe not thinking about going to college, but have an interest or just having that exposure to the opportunities in this new growing industry in the city of Philadelphia, like life sciences? Then also we can get that information to those grassroots community organizations that Mr. Quayum is talking about, to give them that information to talk to young people as they're talking to young people about these opportunities.
Right. I want to address life sciences because it is a booming, I can't think of another term, booming area in our city, University City, and all around there. And there's so much is going on. And I want to ask Sarah if she can talk about that, Sarah Stelz, who has worked in that area. But first, I have to address something that my friend Bilal Quayum said about people don't want to work. There's this thing out here in the world now that people don't want to work because the stimulus program is, they can make more sitting at home than they can working. There's some facts that need to be taken into account when people hear that, and I have to address that. First of all, a lot of females, especially women in our society, because they don't have childcare and the schools have not been in session, they felt the need to stay at home with their children and not let them, just be in the house by themselves, and bad things can happen. And we've seen bad things happen from a violence point of view, where a child in South Philly was at home by himself or herself and was killed School was out. School was remote, and she was doing that. Parent went to school, went to work, and the child was killed. So lack of child care is a real issue for a lot of people while the schools are closed, and therefore they don't go to work. Another reason people are not wanting to go to work is because of safety. I mean, a lot of restaurant people who work in restaurants don't want to go to work because when you go to restaurants, you take off your mask, and I don't want to be working around a lot of people with no mask, and I could be catching COVID. So that is a concern, and even today, as we are coming out of the mask, there are a lot of restaurants who are saying they want to mandate that people wear masks as much as possible in the restaurants because people are afraid to come to work. So there's a lot of considerations why this whole thing is out there about people don't want to work, and obviously it's the minimum wage. Minimum wage in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania is so low, and if we could get the state to come up and have a decent minimum wage in our city, in our state, I think people would be more motivated to come to work. But it's not because people are lazy. I have to speak to that myth. Don't say people just don't want to work because they want to get a welfare check. So let me ask Sarah if you can speak to this is your background working in University City and putting those kind of people to work. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yes, sure. I agree with Mike that life science is a burgeoning industry, and our business development team has a staff member specifically focused on bringing life sciences companies to Philadelphia. But for life sciences to grow here in Philadelphia, of course, we need the talent that Councilman Green mentioned related to lab jobs, research jobs coming out of many of the major universities. But in order for the industry to really grow as it can, we also need to establish opportunities for those in the manufacturing and production space in cell and gene therapy. Those jobs do not have the same level of educational requirements that the lab and science-based jobs do. So, and we also need to think about the real estate available since manufacturing requires a much larger footprint. And we're working with our partners at PIDC to make sure that happens. For me, as someone who has a workforce background, think about how you can create opportunity at scale in a specific industry. What is required is some employer infrastructure. So not an employer here, an employer there that you can tap into, but instead an industry partnership model where you have a bunch of employers coming together to talk about their needs and to access resources to connect and train people for those jobs. And then you need the programs, of course, to train people for those roles. But there is an industry partnership that has started over the last year by the Chamber in partnership with Philadelphia Works. So I would like to invite Pat Clancy to speak. I believe he's on the line. Pat is the president of Philadelphia Works,
sure,
the city's workforce board, to add more detail on that.
Sure. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me join the conversation today, which is really a critical issue, is how do we get individuals into good paying jobs with long-term careers? And one of the things we're working with the Greater Philadelphia Chamber is funding an industry partnership, which enables the Chamber to kind of drill down into those life science companies that are growing in our region. And
Mr. Clancy, if you just state your name for the record.
Sure. Sorry. So I'm Patrick Clancy, President and CEO of Philadelphia Works. And the Chamber is working diligently with the life science sector to really see where is there opportunity across all different levels of occupations. And really beginning to think through how do we build those pipelines into those various occupations. And some of it's entry level, some of it's mid-level, but not missing the opportunity for us as a region to kind of make sure that as life sciences are growing either in University City or at the Navy Yard, that we have a pool of applicants that are beginning now to learn and understand what STEM is. And so we're working with the Chamber on that. But just going back to what Sarah said, the most successful models have been when employers are engaged. We can do all the data collection we want, but when we are working with employers directly and they help us shape sort of the curriculum and and sort of how to get people ready, that is where we're most successful. And I think that's why, our strong working relationship with the Commerce Department and the Chamber really has provided benefits. And hopefully as we build these models out, we know life science is one, but we also have a hospitality one. We also have an advanced manufacturing one. We have a financial sector one in a smaller version, may see with BankWorks and OIC. So we're beginning to look at all our critical industries and seeing where we can begin to sort of map it out so we can have better opportunities for people.
Thank you, Mr. Clancy and Ms. Delps and Mr. Rashid for those comments. And those are all great, but I think the concern, and I'm very familiar with the work that's happening through the Philadelphia Skills Forward initiative. I'm glad to hear that Philadelphia Works is engaged in this concept regarding life sciences. But the challenge is that research is being done, but that information is not getting to people in the community to know that, hey, if I'm a person that's doing a initiative or program on my block in my community, and I know that there's this opportunity for jobs in life sciences, and I know some young people that I come encounter with that are interested in biology, or I see them always asking me about, science or this issue or that issue. They're asking me about, Garrett Morgan or Granville T. Woods, are just interested in just STEM and I just see that aptitude. I think it's at that grassroots level that people need to know about this work, because then they can say, listen, I have some young people that need to be exposed to this because I can see they have an interest in this field. And I think that's ultimately what has happened. I know for me, from my experience at Inroads, I know people went through Prime and a whole bunch of other programs, over the years, going back to the 70s and the 80s. But it's that opportunity for exposure for those who are closely connected to young people can say, hey, there is a program that talks about or is interested or can give you some more information, or maybe give you a career path based on I can see what you're interested in, because you're always borrowing your grandfather's magnifying glass or some other type of thing because you're interested in science or the TV or the stuff. You're always on your phone. That's the disconnect that's not occurring, and I think that's what needs to occur. Now I want to recognize Councilmember Dom and then Councilmember Ging for questions.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Thank you, and thank you to everybody who's on the panel. I just have, a couple quick questions to Commerce Director Michael Rashid. Can you share with us the total number of dollars the city currently commits to on an annual basis for the small black and brown business grant programs?
I can get that number for you, council member. But the whole city, I don't have that handy, but I can get it for you.
You think it's like 10 million, 15 million, 20 million, or not really sure yet?
I don't want to speculate or guess. Let me get the number for you.
Okay, and then I guess the other follow-up to that, if you could do this little study maybe, in your opinion, in Commerce's opinion, how much additional grant dollars into the programs could really change the trajectory of that? So we have an idea of, from the Commerce Department, what are we spending now? How do we change the trajectory? How much money will that cost us, and how do we go about doing that? If you could come back to this committee with that information, it'd be, I think, helpful for us.
Okay, will do. Thank you.
Thank you. And then the other questions I had is that I've been listening, and I keep thinking to myself of something we talked about yesterday. And I don't want to sound like a broken record, but it does upset me that in the last 10 years, the jobs we've created in Philadelphia, and this I think speaks to what Chairman Green was talking about, the jobs we've created in Philadelphia, 60.5% pay less than $35,000. We're actually creating a tremendous amount of low-income jobs. And when you compare us to the top 25 cities, that's 28% for the cities. We're double that. And then when you compare us to the U.S., they're at 29%. And again, we're double. And the category where we're falling far behind is in what I guess we call the family-sustaining jobs that pay $35,000 to $100,000, where we're half of everybody else. And so with that in the background, there's so many things we need to do besides investing in our tax structure to create more jobs, but also education and violence and so forth. Would it make sense for us at this point of time to really make the investment, something I've been talking about for 5 years, and make mandatory in our school system for prevention, teaching from pre-K to 12th grade, teach that financial literacy, teach that technology that we all have realized is so crucial, and teach entrepreneurship. The country of Israel teaches entrepreneurship. 28% of their graduates go into their own businesses. It does work. Think about it. I'm thinking of myself as an example. I never was a great student, but I always liked things that were of interest to me. And maybe we just have to find out for every one of our students what is of interest to them. And for many of them, it could be entrepreneurship. You could change that trajectory, because right now, the formation of our black and brown businesses in the city is abysmal. So this is just one thought, and I don't want to put it out there. Maybe this is part of the investment we make. And we won't see the benefits of this for the next 5 or 10 years, but you will see the benefits in 15 and 20 years. It is a long-term outlook. Anyway, thank you, Mr. Chair, and appreciate this committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Dom. Councilmember Gim?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. First of all, I just wanted to, thank the Commerce Department and Heloise for doing a brief overview on the Fair Chance Hiring Initiative. This is an area that I've been keenly interested in part because it shifts around some of our thinking on traditionally. We had worked closely with Sylvie on tracking the evolution of the program. So initially it came in the form of tax credits to employers who hire formerly incarcerated individuals. And then the Commerce Department switched it from a tax credit on the back end to a grant on the front end. And it seemed to be far more successful. And so we were talking initially with the Commerce Department about, given the success of the program, to what extent it might be expanded as the budget permits in this post-COVID environment, but also, to deal with vulnerable youth, for example. We've been looking at the importance of guaranteed employment, support for small businesses who engage young people who are, for example, in the top 10 zip codes most impacted by gun violence, or who attend one of the 25 schools where 50% of the youth who've been shot in the last 22 years have been in attendance. So I'm interested in hearing, from your perspective, a little bit more about the Fair Chance Hiring Initiative and the possibility of expansion, if, for example, council were to include it, and whether the department in particular would be interested or see any possibilities in the relationships that you've built through the small businesses you've worked with to potentially expand it, support small businesses locally, and help us engage and employ vulnerable, at-risk individuals.
Great. First of all, thank you for your comments, and you're right. That is a wonderful program. It has shown much greater effectiveness than some of the tax credit programs, and also much easier to administer. Heloise, you want to talk more about how we're going to expand the Fair Chance program?
Good morning. As far as expansion, so we have the funds. We need more people prepared for the employers that we have. We've got a lot of really strong businesses, strong employers that are in need of talent. What we are endeavoring to do as far as expansion is widening our network of where we get talent from, whether it's from small grassroots organizations that are preparing individuals, that are providing those supportive services, and cultivating that culture with the folks that are ready to work in a progressive way so that we can offer them as viable candidates to our employer partners. That's the expansion that we need. We have employers, over 45 employers that are hiring, that are open to hiring, that have positions. And what we need to do is ensure that we are reaching all of those organizations. Again, small, the ones we know, the ones we all know very well that we can name, as well as those that are in the communities where these businesses are located, that they understand what is needed, that the basic tenets of work readiness that we need for our individuals to be prepared for those particular positions, and then them understanding the positions that these employers have. So expansion in that regard is where we're going.
Okay. And are you is the department, if it were to get additional funding, could you expand it beyond, in addition to formerly incarcerated residents or returning citizens? Is there an openness to thinking about its expansion, or do you think that you really need to spend most of your time on this current group because it needs more support?
No, we are absolutely open to expansion. I mean, the supply of people is there. The demand, as Heloise is saying, the demand is there. We need to be able to connect the dots. So, yeah, this is what's necessary.
One of the things that we've been discussing a little bit has been the need for that intermediary that I think Heloise is discussing. And I don't think it's like, individuals just land at a nonprofit and then they go into business and then, there's like a happily ever after story that's written. I think it's a lot about that, the role that commerce can do to help with the mentoring and or support network as an individual is re-entering and coming, from being like, say, disengaged, from systems of care and employment, and then moving between like mentoring and then back, into workforce, but always having a place to land in case people encounter, as we all very well know, racism, discrimination on the job, frustrations or other types of things that they might experience. So will be continued to be interested in the Fair Chance Hiring Initiative. The more data that you can share with this council body, I know that all of us are interested in things that work, and to hear people say that there is demand, that businesses are eager to hire returning citizens, and what we need is to find more people, is a great place for us to be able to delve deep, to partner with our community organizations. And I think you're hearing from myself, and I know our chair have a deep commitment to the Commerce Department right now, to really see some creative, successful programming. Because I think working on the things that are working for us is really important. Understanding why they work, what's appealing to people about it, and then figuring out how to make meet what is needed within communities. Because we've definitely got need in communities. We had, for example, in 2019. There were 20,000 applicants to the to the Work Ready program through Philadelphia Youth Network. There were 8,000 slots. So there is definitely a need. And if there's a partnership, maybe those are areas where you can meet those employers. We can manage things for your small businesses, make sure that the relationship and the program is successful and healthy for both ends. And I, again, want to just commit and, first of all, thank the Commerce Department for its work on the Fair Chance Hiring Initiative, but also make a commitment that our office is an eager partner to help make it as a model for our city and, if not, for our country. So thank you.
Thank you for your commitment, council member. Members of my staff who are on the line, they can tell you that they hear from me all the time that we have to do a better job of telling our story, not only to the public, but also to the city council, to you folks. And so we're committed to do that, and we will do what you suggested.
Chair Green, if I may.
Please proceed, Ms. Atwood.
Thank you. And to address some of the opportunities that exist that are in place that need to be implemented, specifically supporting individuals who have been impacted by the criminal justice system. In our Office of Reentry Partners, we have we are standing up the neighborhood resource centers. Part of the work of the neighborhood resource centers is the wraparound services for individuals who are being released from incarceration and on supervision. They will not only have probation and parole there, but but the model there's mentoring there are job training supports there is that connectivity that exists, that we can build, we can have a physical infrastructure for, and so there is work that is happening to focus on individuals who are friends or neighbors, hell, my cousins who are coming out of incarceration, who are on supervision, who need those supports. The other thing is as we think about that connectivity, who those credible folks are to fill that gap, we are very comfortable in hiring search forms for executive level positions. But how can we incentivize individuals who have connectivity to folks on the street that can fill these jobs, that be those recruiters, so to speak, to make sure that they are connecting the individuals they know to the jobs that exist? And how are we training those middle ground folks to be those connectivity and incentivizing them the same way we'd incentivize some large search firm?
Chairman Green, can I just have a quick point of clarification for Erica Atwood?
Yes, go for it.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you. Well, one, I absolutely believe that the city's been doing a much better job around supports. Are you connected at all with the Fair Chance Hiring Initiative through the Commerce Department? Or
we are.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so we are. So in two ways. One, Heloise and Zakia attend our tactical meetings on a weekly basis, and I talk to one of them several times a week. We are figuring out ways that we can build a strategy, short-term and long-term, to support individuals that are impacted by violence and or the criminal justice system. And when I say impacted, I mean victims, perpetrators, and witnesses in neighborhoods that are particularly oppressed by racism and poverty.
And do you feel like, among the areas that we're also taking a look at, although this is sometimes a little bit harder, but, would that also include, like, for example, young people out of the juvenile justice system? So either those that are returning from placement, those who are, who've been in, even in, some of them obviously are like youth who've been placed in adult prisons, unfortunately, in Pennsylvania, which needs to end. But primarily we are looking at youth in residential placement, because when they come back, some of these placement facilities, unfortunately, with a lack of oversight that we've got right now at the state level, the abuses that have been significantly documented in media repeatedly. These are supposed to be places where young people can find support, mentoring, healing, and instead are not. So they are replicating a abusive adult penal system. And I'm wondering if there's a means for us to find considerable and continued landing spaces. But definitely we have, thousands, about 1,000 youth at any given time over the course of the year who might be placed in residential placement either through DHS or through the court system, sometimes through mental health, but primarily through DHS at this point. And it's just asking for your partnership to think about supports for them through the Fair Chance Hiring. And then the last thing I'll just say is that, when our young people are separated from their families at a very young age, and they go into places and they're not cared for, and the state doesn't have oversight, and God help us if they suffer any amount of violence or physical abuse in these facilities. But it would be naive for us to think that they don't either at least witness it in some of these places, if not suffer from it directly. Either way, they're coming back to us hurt and angry, and some of them are then pursuing, are involved in the gun violence. We know the numbers are getting younger. Many of us have been shocked by the age range of some of the folks who are young people who are there. But we need re-engagement, we need reconnection, and we have very few landing places for youth in particular. So would just urge the Commerce Department, Erica, just let's maintain a partnership on this. and I know we'll continue to figure this out. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Gim. I want to also recognize Reverend Gregory Holston from District Attorney's Office. I thought we did not realize he was speaking on behalf of the District Attorney's Office. I believe he is on.
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you. And
if you could please state your name for the record, I'd like to add you to the panel.
My name is Reverend Gregory Holston. I am the senior pastor of James Memorial United Methodist Church, and also a member of Black clergy, as well as the
Reverend
senior.
Holston, if you could hold on one moment. What I was saying is that after you finish your testimony, we'll then open up questions for you and any other additional questions that members of the council may have for this entire panel. And then from there, we'll go on to our next panel. So please, once again, state your name for the record and then proceed with your testimony.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councilman. My name is Reverend Gregory Holston. I'm the senior pastor for James Memorial United Methodist Church in the Germantown section of Philadelphia. I'm also a member of Black clergy and also the senior advisor on policy and advocacy for the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office. I'm not sure exactly who I'm testifying for. I wouldn't be that clear, but I was asked to come and to share. And so, first of all, I want to thank Councilman Green for pulling this committee together on these three and very important topics of poverty, systematic racism, and gun violence. We have said, and I have said over and over, that as Erica said earlier, gun violence really is a symptom of the systematic racism and poverty that is in our country. That you cannot really talk about gun violence unless you're talking about the 250 years of slavery, the 100 years of Jim Crow, the 100 years of redlining of our areas in Philadelphia, North Philadelphia, and West Philadelphia in particular, the 60 years of massive disinvestment that has left parts of North Philadelphia looking like a bombed out war zone. 50 years of war on drugs that from all evidence was really more of a war on black people. 40 years of mass incarceration. And this last many years of 10 years of disinvestment in our schools, in terms of closing 23 of our schools, mostly in black and brown communities, that have left our areas as these schools are major hubs economically and every other way for those communities, devastated by the loss. All of those things, including this pandemic over the last year, has led to this escalation of this chronic problem of gun violence, this escalation that we are dealing with now. There's 499 murders from last year, 2,300 shootings, and now to even a greater level at this time, this year already 200 homicides. And so what do we do? I applaud all of the efforts listed here by the Commerce Department. I applaud all of the efforts here to get people into jobs. I applaud all the efforts that are being tried and trying to do. But I agree with really what I heard State Senator Hughes say just a couple of weeks ago. We are at a dramatic point right now. We are at a generational point in our nation right now that's unlike any other that I have experienced or many people have experienced maybe since the 1960s. The American Recovery Act is doing exactly what it said. It's helping America to recover. And the $1.4 billion that our city has received from the American Recovery Act and the $1.4 million that our school districts have received are dollars, an infusion of capital that we have not seen in a long time. But even more than that, the Recovery Act is working. The state budget now has a $3 billion surplus. Just 3 months ago, it had no surplus. But when you put dollars into the pockets of regular people, those dollars bubble up and add coffers and more revenue for our governments. And not only that, they still have $7.2 billion from the Recovery Act. And so these kinds of dollars we have not seen, and it gives us an opportunity to do something really different around systematic racism, poverty, and gun violence that we have not done before. And that's why I applaud all the programs, but we need to do something more drastic. The reality is that still today, that a white high school dropout makes more money than a black college graduate. If education was the only issue here, if training was the only issue here, if job training was the only issue here, you would not have a statistic like that where even the trained and the educated black person is making less than the less trained and less educated white person. And one of the reasons for that is that we have not in the black community, and the events like Tulsa make it very clear, we have not developed the kinds of systems, because we've been systematically denied institutions in our community that allow for those to have jobs that are controlled by the black community. We have not built a black distribution system. We have not built a black wholesale house system. We have not built a system where black products are brought to market. We have not built enough outlets, enough stores to be able to handle those products. You go into an Asian community, you go into their stores, you see products that are only in those stores because they have systematically developed a distribution system for those products. You go into even to a Latino store, you'll see products that are only in Latino stores because they have developed a system, a distribution system for that. And we have to take the revenue or the monies that we're getting right now, that once we give $100 million for gun violence, once we do the other kinds of things that's necessary, we have to take some of that money to really start to lay down and create a black distribution system for black products, so that our black unemployment problem, and which in some parts of our city is 50%, that those individuals can come in and learn about how to make economics work. Because most of us don't even understand that I can develop my own product and get someone to manufacture it and get someone to distribute it and get someone along the distribution line to get that product in store and actually sell product and make money. And we need to be able to do that and create that, not only teach about it, but make it happen in this city for those who are craving for opportunities, who are not necessarily skilled to go on to higher education, but are strong and powerful entrepreneurs that need greater opportunity and greater hope. And so I'm just proposing this one suggestion of doing something really different. And I believe, and that's why I'm glad, Councilman Green, you came back on, because I wanted to applaud you again for the public bank, because this is the kind of thing a public bank can do. Help us build a real black distribution system within the city of Philadelphia, help raise the dollars, help leverage governmental dollars to raise other dollars so that we can produce that system that will allow us to be able to employ our own people and be able to deal with this gap where white high school dropouts make more than even black college graduates. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any other questions from members of council for this panel? All right, seeing and hearing none from members of council, we will now move forward to the next panel. Mr. Iannuzi, can please read the names of the next panelists. And once we begin, please state your name for the record and then proceed with your testimony.
William Carter, Vice President for Local Government Affairs, Greater Philadelphia Chamber of Commerce. Eric Williams, co-founder of Shape Up, Barbers Building Better Brothers. Movita Johnson-Harrell, founder of the Charles Foundation. And Daoud Bey, co-executive director and co-founder, Foot It Down.
Thank you, Mr. Iannuzi. We will go in that order. And Mr. Carter, if you could start and state your name and proceed with your testimony.
All right, Councilman, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
All right. William Carter, Vice President of Government Affairs for the Chamber of Commerce for Greater Philadelphia. This is our testimony for the hearing. First of all, good morning, Councilman Green, members of the committee. Once again, I'm William Carter, Vice President of Local Government Affairs for the Chamber of Commerce for Greater Philadelphia. The Chamber is currently engaged in an agenda designed to drive inclusive economic recovery and growth citywide in partnership with City Council, the Mayor's administration, and numerous grass-top and grassroots organizations. To foster such growth, we're committed to, through our Skills Forward initiative, reskilling and hiring thousands of displaced and unemployed workers residing in Philadelphia, city residents, through our diverse procurement collaborative to increasing private sector procurement opportunities with local Black and brown businesses. Recently announced a $100 million effort to increase investments with Black and brown businesses. And we're working in collaboration with Council and the Mayor to shape an inclusive growth budget that will use American Rescue Plans to make investments in equity and job growth. What I really wanted to talk about today is really economic opportunity and empowerment. That's what this is all about. Creating a dialogue that and action that creates opportunities to improve people's quality of life. If you think about it, everyone wants the same thing, to pursue happiness, to take care of themselves and their loved ones, and to be able to live their quote-unquote best lives. As an example, a lot of young residents are into hip-hop, like I am. Hip-hop is a lifestyle. When something's a lifestyle, everything in life relates to it. It relates to everything in life. It relates to the way people live. It relates to how people live. It relates to basics like clothing, food, shelter. It relates to extras like communications, transportation, and recreation. The hip-hop culture relates to everything in life. It simply is a lifestyle, and Madison Avenue knows this. More and more, they're using hip-hoppers and hip-hop lifestyle to sell products to that lifestyle. They sell what we buy. They from low-end to top shelf. They make what hip-hoppers wear. They manufacture what hip-hoppers drive. They advertise where hip-hoppers should go, and they tell hip-hoppers what to spend money on. They are selling a hip-hop lifestyle. What should be instilled in our hip-hop generation is if they can buy it, they can create it, manufacture it, and sell it. We struggle with trying to find alternatives to the streets, with implementing an array of social programs directed at educating youth. We scramble to find things to occupy time for our inner city youth. What I know all of you know, what we must do more of is create more opportunity. And in many instances we have, but we have to do more. And it takes more than just creating the opportunity. We can't just say, hey, here's an opportunity, take advantage of it. We have to do a better job of highlighting the path towards opportunity and instill the mindset that people can take advantage of the opportunities available. Instill in them that there's no insurmountable divide between a creator of textiles and themselves, between a cellular phone provider and themselves, especially if we work together. They must know that they can be the lifeline of the lifestyle. I think world famous entrepreneur and hip-hopper Jay-Z put it best when he said, if someone would have told Hov he could sell clothing, not in his lifetime, wasn't in my right mind. And that's gave me pause to think, a lot of people, if they are of the mindset that they can do things, can see things outside of what they normally would see and the opportunities are shown to them, they could get in the right mind. And there are multitudes of talented youth out here who simply need to be shown that if they're of the right mindset, they can take advantage of the opportunities, improve their quality of life. And the private and public sector should be at the forefront of such mind setting. We should be professional mind setters. Our youth can be empowered. Our youth can be successful can build successful enterprises. They can be the creators of not just the consumers of the lifestyle. They must be shown and truly understand that they can own an international clothing boutique, that they can own marketing firms, that they can own happening restaurants and hotels, that they can be the next entrepreneurs out here shouting like Jay-Z, 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, 4. In 13 months, 30 million more. And if you add that up to the number he said before, you're now looking at one smart black boy. And that's something that we need to take to heart in terms of our youth out here, showing them new opportunities, showing them that there are alternatives to what they have seen. And the public and private sector, we need to be at the forefront of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. We'll have questions for this panel after the other witnesses on this panel testify. Mr. Iannuzi, I believe our next witness to testify is Eric Williams. Mr. Williams, if you could please state your name for the record and then proceed with your testimony.
Okay, good morning. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you. Thank you. Okay.
Good day. My name is Eric Williams. I'm testifying today in support of resolution number 210169. Thank you, Councilman Green, for this invitation. My business partner and longtime friend, Mike Moreau, and I are co-founders of Shape Up. Shape Up is a gun violence, sex relationship, and financial literacy initiative for youth ages 12 to 24. Mike Moreau is the owner and operator of ESPN Hair located 5929 West Girard. Mike has been a barbershop owner for over 27 years and has an unbelievable passion to invest and improve the quality of lives for our next generation. The University of Pennsylvania School of Nursing partnered with ESPN Arizona a few years ago to conduct a pilot study focusing on gun violence in high crime neighborhoods in Philadelphia. To date, it's the only study in the United States funded by the National Institute for Child and Human Development. Shape Up is a 3-month, 6-part curriculum held at ESPN Arizona every first and third Monday from 7 to 9 p.m. You may ask yourself, why at the barbershop? Well, it's simple. All of you know the barbershop is one of the most comfortable businesses in our community. At any given time, you may have a city official, elderly, youth, business person, or even a drug dealer or a criminal. Barbers are like our therapists, accountants, counselors, sports commentators, etc., etc. This alone makes the barbershop the perfect setting for Shape Up. Shape Up hosted an open house soft launch March 7th through May the 17th for 8 youth. The dialogue shared between the youth and the mentors has been unbelievable. When asked, some of the participants couldn't even remember the last time they had a hug or someone told them they loved them. As a result, by the time they experience life in the streets, they're detached from their emotional state, which from there they become at risk. My belief, you're at risk when you leave your home because it's not guaranteed in today's society you'll return. Shape Up official launch is Monday, June the 7th. Since our first soft launch, we have ex-offenders, judges, parole officers, accounting, lawyers, and business owners who are currently in training to become mentors to create internship and employment opportunities. We have a parole officer send a participant via a court order and is working to have Shape Up as a resource in the judicial system. Shape Up is facilitating a 2-hour, 5-week session at Friary Charter Middle School for 5th to 8th graders. We're in negotiations with West Philly High, and several other schools have expressed interest and have stated the teachers and counselors are not equipped to teach such programs, and outside sources such as Shape Up are necessary. Talks have been even discussed to have Shape Up implemented in HBCUs as part of a community development series. All of the group mentions fit the demographic. However, in order to effectively maximize this endeavor, funding is required. Financially supporting programs such as Shape Up would serve as a way to regain our communities. This multi-year plan not only supports Shape Up will provide a funding stream for other gun violence and community-based organizations. For this not to have a strategic plan in place while lives are being lost daily is unacceptable. And it pains me to text my friend and colleague Derek Green whenever a life is lost. He's my friend first, and I don't want to jeopardize our friendship over a lack thereof. So in closing, I'll leave with a quote from my mentor, Dr. Cornell West. And it reads, "You cannot lead the people if you don't love the people. You cannot save the people if you don't serve the people." Again, thank you, Councilman Green, for this invitation to testify. Members of City Council, your commitment and dedication to serve is appreciated, and the listener audience for your attention. Everyone have a great day on purpose, and I thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Williams, for your testimony. I believe our next witness is Miss Movita Johnson Harrell, followed by Dawood Bey. Not sure if Ms. Johnson Harrell's with us, but let's go with Mr. Dawood Bey at this point in time.
Thank you, Councilman Green.
Thank you.
Appreciate y'all having me here today. I just went through a major surgery for some implants on my teeth, so I'm not necessarily camera worthy right now. So
thank you for being with us.
Yes, going through a lot of pain, but been going through a lot of pain witnessing our young men and women being murdered on our streets every day. And I start out like that because it's been very painstaking for us to take the time that we have to do. When I say us, I talk about my co-founders in our organization called Put It Down. Put It Down is an organization that's been founded by me and my partner, Dal Shula and Salam Muksen. And we've been meeting with various different practitioners, various different law enforcement agencies, elected officials, people from within the community, and doing some interviewing with some potential credible messengers. Within that process, as I say, it's been painstaking because as we, have the intentions to try to make sure that we do all of the proper research and talk with all of the various professionals that may have been in this business prior to us, it's still a painstaking process because we still have to see our young men and women being murdered on the streets every day. As someone mentioned, we already now at 200 and something murders. And one of the things that I wanted to point out is that we are in a very critical time in history right now. And I believe even as African American leaders of our communities, we are in a very pivotal moment of greatness, actually. We have an opportunity to really get a lot of things done and get things done right if we unify our thought process. And I believe we're getting closer. I'm listening to everyone's testimony and things that people are saying here today. And it's just a matter of making the proper connections between street credibility and science. We need guys like myself, that was once part of the problem, who now trying to be a part of the solution to be more vocal and more involved with issues of gun violence. When we categorize and speak of the terminology that's been popularized now as credible messengers, one of the things that we need in order to remain credible is the resources from various city, state, and government agencies in order to be able to really, really provide the resources for these kids as we make the contact. And when I say the contact, we're talking about going directly to the shooters and the killers. We have guys that we personally know that's bona fide shooters. We have people that we have communicated through law enforcement because we have built a one-way data sharing relationship with law enforcement, whereas they let us know certain neighborhoods where may be certain hot spots and different things to that extent. And we have went into these neighborhoods and shown that we could basically reduce the gun violence if we do the intervention with the actual shooters and killers. So one of the things that we wanted to be clear as we all begin to try to figure out what is the approach towards reducing gun violence in our community. One of the things that my mom used to always teach me, that there's always a cause and an effect to everything. And I hear Erica Artwood speak so eloquently about the systemic racism aspect to it, which is very, very pivotal and very, very key, and is almost being cliche-ish, but it's so real that we have to really pay attention to it from the standpoint that we have to begin to figure out from a scientific standpoint what is causing these young men to be as aggressive as they are in our communities. And I had a conversation the other day with Councilman Kenyatta. We were just throwing some thoughts back and forth, just in regards like what is the issue. And I pointed out to him, one of our friends, actually, me and Kenyatta grew up with a friend of ours. He's now deceased. He was killed in gun violence. But a friend of his that he used to date, her son just been indicted for probably like 6 homicides. He's 16 years old. He's the kid that was involved with the homicide where the guy was coming outside of the prison. So one of the things that we was talking about, okay, before they demonize this guy, we need to look at what is the backstory behind some of this youth and what's causing them to do the things that they're doing. And when we know, because we know these families, we know them personally, this kid's family has been in this kid's witnessed his mother kill her boyfriend because he was molesting his sister, allegedly, and come to find out the sister was lying. He was never molesting them. But the mother went to prison for it. While his mother was in prison, his father died. So it's just things that we just want to kind of figure, would it start tying in and making the connections from academia and from science and from streets. The street guys that's on the streets. When we say street credibility, we talking about guys who have a direct contact and pulse beat of the individuals, the communities, their families, and some of the history of their family. These are the connections that have to be made, and I believe we're on our way to, on the verge of making these connections, because now I'm communicating with Michael Rashid in regards to how can commerce be involved. And to answer Derek Green's question earlier, like how could these organizations be more engaged and how could commerce play a role in that? Well, commerce do have a lot of access to various different organizations that could provide jobs. We need to get commitments, because there are, as Michael Rashid said, there's a lot of young men that really want jobs. There's a lot of young women that want jobs, you know, but there is some phobias. There is some fear as relates to some of the guys being afraid, not just because they're getting a stimulus check. Some of these guys don't want to work on a work site because they're afraid of getting killed. So at the end of the day, it's a lot of psychological trauma that's impacting our youth, that's causing them to be over sensitive about very different issues and things. So my question, and one of the things that I think we have to tie into, because I made contact with a guy that I know that's a bona fide shooter. And this guy, if we can turn this guy around, he could probably help us reduce gun violence by 50% in South Philadelphia. So how do we get this guy? But he got some issues. He told me, as I was explaining to this kid, explaining to him about the programs, because one of the things Pro Down going to do is we're going to focus highly on mental health treatment. We have a situation where all of us as staff members has been trained by the network of neighbors that teaches us about post-stress traumatic management. And it teaches us how to first deal with it and have coping mechanisms to help us through stress and trauma, because most of us been through stress and trauma. And as African American men, I think it's important that we begin to start speaking about mental health issues, because it's in our communities, it's like a taboo issue, and we can't get to the core of the issues that's dealing with these young men. Because in order for us to bring proper diagnosis to these problems, we first have to do a proper assessment. And I heard someone mention something about hip hop, because one of the things that we got in regards to our program, we got a thing called From Trauma to Champions, where we're going to use music as a means and lyrics from music as a means to engage with youth, to help them navigate through some of the vicious music that they're listening to and how that music impact their thinking, but using music as a tool for healing. So it's a few different things that we have. And some guys, like you say, may not want to work for various different reasons, but to have a combination, one of the things that Put It Down is doing is we're setting up training programs for job training, for soft skills and hard skills. We already have curriculums for carpentry, plumbing, electric, and HVAC. and have a partnership that we're establishing with the Philadelphia Carpenters Union, where they're going to allow us to be able to use their training facility to help some of these guys as relate to wanting to get into the carpentry in the building industry. So we have to have a plethora of different resources available for these guys, because me and Dow Schuler, we are confident that when we go on the streets and we begin to start doing real intervention with the actual shooters and killers, when we bring them off the battlefield, we need all of y'all. We need all of local and state agencies to be in that emergency room to provide the resources for them. That's going to, because if we don't have the resources for them right there immediately, they're going to go back to the streets and they're going to die. So when we say we need to classify gun violence as a public health emergency, we're saying it from that standpoint, that if we don't get all of our communications and all of our resources on the same page and ready and available with transparency to be able to help these kids get their birth certificates, driver's license, social security cards, and just the basic stuff that they need to get prepared for the recovery room. Because our recovery room is where the training programs and the soft skill programs and the entrepreneurship programs and job training programs will be. But if we can't even get them, and the reason why we know that this type of conveyor belt type of system have to be in place, because we're not just going off of proof of concepts, which we have did that, because as I started out in the beginning, I explained to you that we have talked to countless different practitioners, local and national, to be able to figure out what do we do and what not to do, so we can make sure that we try to get this situation right here in Philadelphia. But we're not just going off of this based off of proof of concepts. We're going off of proof of experience. Because I have guys right now that's in the graveyard because we did intervention and we was able to, and if we was able to be as transparent as I'm speaking about, we could have saved this kid life. And how do I know? He had potential because he was going to school, college, coming home and going to war, going to college and coming home and going to war. So it shows us that he was trying. But if we don't have these emergency, this transparency that I'm talking about, if we don't have all of these resources ready and available for when we do the intervention, because this is a critical stage of transitioning, and these things have to be there, because if we don't be there, this kid now is in the graveyard, because I went to my cousin's funeral and I stumbled on this kid's grave and I've seen the kid's name on the tag and he's now in the grave. So when we say public health emergency, we mean that we have to be serious about this issue here. And we have to tie in all of these various different organizations and resources and try to figure out how do we make sure that we get this how do we turn a bona fide shooter? Because he may have a couple cases, because we have in our program a case deferment program that we talked to the DA office about. I believe Reverend Holston is here in representation of the DA office. But we sat down countless times speaking to Larry Krasner as relates to if there's possibility for us to do case deferments and allow kids to be a part of our program for a year, which the mandatory would have the mental health treatment. But at the same time, they would be able to make the transition to becoming true, real, certified, credible messengers. Because I say that because I understand that there may be some concerns as relates to who's a credible messenger and if that person is still in the streets or not, and what if he get locked up or not. Listen, all the fruit don't ripe at one time. And we're all African American people, and we understand the condition of our people, and we have to understand that it's a transition. And everybody makes mistakes. So we have to stop being afraid to invest into organizations like Put It Down, organizations like Unity in the Community, organizations like NOMO. And I mention other organizations because we understand that we don't have the end all be all on what it takes to stop or reduce gun violence. We're willing to work with all various different organizations. I see Erica Artwood is on the call. We've been in countless conversations with her as relates to what could we do to partner with them to figure out what do we need to do to help deal with this gun violence and add credibility and notoriety to an elevation on what everyone is doing. Because I think we need to start working closer together and figure out how we can elevate each other. And I believe that Put It Down is have the kind of leadership that's necessary. And I believe that if y'all will focus on the programs that we already put in front of most of y'all, Alan Dom, I send it to you. Kenyatta Johnson, I send it to you. Derek Green, I haven't sent it to you, but I will send it to you after this call. And whomever else that may need to see our funding proposal, we have a complete funding proposal that I believe is second to only the city of Philadelphia. You understand? The reason why I say that, because we have worked so closely with them, and I see a lot of our bullet points in their proposal. So at the end of the day, the only person that I see that's second to our proposal is the city of Philadelphia. And for everyone's comfort zone, we are already partnering with the Urban Affairs Coalition. The Urban Affairs Coalition will be our fiscal sponsor. So even though Put It Down is coming out as a new organization, me and Darryl Schuler have 25, 30 years of experience in this business. It's just a new organization that we're starting, but we won't look like it's new because we'll be using the 501c3 number of the UAC. So that's something that I just wanted to kind of let y'all know, that we're set up from an organizational standpoint. We have any questions, anything that needed to be asked as related to our proposal, I'm here because it's my intellectual property. I helped put it all together. So anything that's needed to be asked as related to what do we need to do to make these things, what do we need to do to make these things become reality? I'm sitting here and I'm eager to get involved and try to figure out exactly what it is that we need to do so we can get into implementation of what we need to do. And I wanted to also say this in closing, that I believe the Commerce Department is a great, safe way of funneling funding for these particular type programs to get them more involved so they can actually really facilitate meetings and relationships between the corporate companies as well as organizations that's on the ground, because the corporate companies have to understand that if they don't have no interest in gun violence, then they got to realize that it's also going to affect the way that their business operates. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bay. Are there any questions for this panel? I don't see any questions from other members of the council, but I do have a few questions just for this panel, specifically from, and I think you, Mr. Bay, you mentioned this about the need for the program, the information getting to grassroots community-based organizations. Mr. Williams, I want to ask you from a similar perspective, considering that Mr. Monroe has a business and he's connecting the business to trying to address the public safety issues, anti-violence, which also kind of connects to what Mr. Bay was saying as well. Can you give your thoughts on, either of you, your thoughts on doing a better job of how we get the information regarding, we talked about life sciences and other industries, to get that information available to those organizations that are really connecting with young people, trying to either talk with shooters or talk with other people to get them cognizant, aware of these opportunities to be able to take a different path?
Sure. One is just allowing us on a larger scale, not just in the West Philadelphia community, but partnering with organizations like Put It Down and the others to reach different areas of the city. He mentioned some key initiatives, and one like Shape Up could be a pipeline, because after you complete the 3-month program, we still look to fund the individual because we have to have a next steps for them. And organizations like a Put It Down or some other Man Up PHL, Frontline Dads, and the others that's been mentioned during this conversation, we can send them right through that program to and have other organizations as to be what's next for them, to give them not just they get lost in a system or after the 3-month or whatever duration of any program that's been mentioned today, what happens next. because, young people, they want the end result at the beginning. So just so you can see them through and hold their hand and see them through what they're experiencing now. But most importantly, what's the next step for them? Because we got to keep them out the streets and we got to keep them active in what's going on. So just partner with different organizations that they can see the next step is doable from a Black and brown community perspective. So I think that's really key in getting the message out, because there's not one program or organization that's going to get it done by themselves.
And just to follow up on that point, thank you, Mr. Williams. Mr. Carter, I think one of the other things, and I was talking earlier to the first panel about, what is the Commerce Department and Ms. Atwood's work to try to really make that connection. But I think from the Chamber of Commerce perspective, considering we do have these grassroots community-based organizations that are doing in the working communities regarding anti-violence activity, I think it would be a great opportunity to connect some of the business interests with those organizations, so there could be at least to hear some of the challenges and perspective. One, for what Dawood Bey or Eric Williams or Bilal Qayyum and what they're doing in the communities to address violence and challenges, but then for them also to hear from representatives in different businesses to say, listen, we have these type of jobs. These are the type of jobs that we have that are available for people with various skill sets, so that both sides can hear from each other. And I think that will give a better sense of, now, if I know what some of the businesses are looking for employment, it makes it easier for me to, when I come in contact with certain young individuals, to be able to say, hey, here's an opportunity, and then vice versa for the business community, especially the ones who are active and engaged with the chamber, to hear some of the challenges that those in the anti-violence movement are encountering, to hear both sides of that perspective.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you, Councilman, and I'm very familiar with Mr. Qayyum, and I look forward to having those type of conversations, because you can't really tell people not to do something without showing them, hey, something to do. That's just only one side of the equation. So you want to be able to say, hey, this is a pathway, a better pathway for you to go that will give you a better quality of life. And those conversations need to be had with the stakeholders, certainly from the private sector and the nonprofit sector in this space. So definitely, anytime you'd like to broker that conversation with myself and Mr. Qayyum and whomever else, look forward to that.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. Are there any additional questions for this panel? Hearing and seeing none, Mr. Iannuzzi, if you could read the names of the last panel. In addition, if there's anyone else that is here that would like to testify after the last panelist speaks, please state your name for the record, and I'll come back to this point after the last panelist speaks.
Reverend Carl Day, President and Founder of Culture Changing Christians Incorporated, and Will Little.
Hello?
Yes, if you could just state your name for the record and then proceed with your testimony.
Okay, Pastor Carl Day of Culture Changing Christians. And I'm here to obviously discuss a bit of what we do, but also the issues of gun violence and testify on behalf of the issues of violence in the city, and so a lot of what we heard.
So the unprecedented volume increases with the United States Postal Service.
Okay, if anyone is not testifying, if you can please put your microphone on.
Delivery of monthly pension checks.
So
allow extra time for your check.
Council support, if you could put everyone on mute except for
you pay the receipt further. Please note, your call may be monitored or recorded for quality assurance purposes.
Council support, if you could put everyone on mute. But Mr. Day.
For benefit checks or
I believe it's coming from Michael R. That's
okay. I think we are now good. Okay.
All right. So,
thank you, Mr. Day. If you could just for the stenographer, just make sure you state your name and then proceed with the testimony.
All right. Pastor Carl Day, CARL, last name Day, day of the week, DAY, of Culture Changing Christians. Been pastoring and doing actual outreach work in this city for over 10 plus years now. I too have been a part of the problem once upon a time. Been convicted of violent crimes in the city in the previous life of mine. I've dedicated my life in the city of Philadelphia to really serving families, serving guys that are out there on the streets. We've gotten brothers to transition, over 18 men in the last 3 years, to transition out of the streets into starting their own businesses, including car lots, including home healthcare aid businesses, into cleaning companies, amongst other things, to shoestring with little to no money, shoestring budgets. I pastor millennials in the city of Philadelphia, also in Essex County, North Jersey. So pre-COVID, I would travel back and forth and preach service and teach Bible study. And majority of my congregants were from Bloomfield, New Jersey, and Newark, New Jersey. Newark is very much like a smaller Philadelphia. So we've done extensive work with returning citizens. We do a ton of work with college students, college age individuals, teenagers. I currently mentor over 52 teens in this city, teenage boys, have taken on various ones with open cases, ones who actually we've gotten, judges to sign off to allow them to go and partake our programming while being on house arrest. This has all been done within the past few years. Every single day after school, we provided a safe zone because we understood that after school hours were the most dangerous and vulnerable times for teenage youth in our city, which is why oftentimes we would see the L stations, we would see the subway stations where a lot of violence would take place. We would see downtown and we would see Liberty Place where they would go meet up, which is why the city had to put certain things in practice to not allow teens at Liberty Place after school hours. Then also Fashion District, prior to COVID, kids were meeting up and fighting there. These are the things that my youth would always tell me, make me aware of. So a few years back, we started an after school program, created a safe zone for these teenage boys. And there's no discrimination to women, obviously. We run single mother cohorts where we run programming to help assist them, help aid and help fill in the gaps, because oftentimes we talk about what a village looks like for a family, but yet a lot of the times these mothers don't have the help. A lot of these mothers can't be heard. Mothers are sitting here working 60 to 70 hours a week while their children are left out here to pretty much fend for themselves. So for us, it wasn't just enough for us to say, let's reach youth, let's also reach the parents. But then also, Dawood Bey spoke about Daryl Schuler, do a lot of work with Daryl Schuler as well inside our communities alongside of John Solomon with Endangered Kind, where we are on the grounds intervening. We are after hours, late night, spending time out there amongst guys who are really doing the shootings. In fact, Fridays, Reverend Holston can attest to this, State Rep Danilo Burgos, Dr. Gene Wright. Every Friday at my location here, we bring in those men who are actively involved in whatever they're involved into without incriminating anybody, and we talk solutions. It's from anywhere from 18 to 24 men that, myself and John Solomon bring through the streets, because we're spending time out there intervening with them, and we have conversation and dialogue about what are actual needs, and I say this in all truth and transparency, and I speak about this from the position of, I guess we could say that we're triple dipping diversity. I'm a millennial black man, a formerly incarcerated man that walk around with a felony, but also clergy. And I'm here to attest to the fact that we've also have to deal with a measure and account of accountability. We failed a generation in reaching a generation of individuals for a long time. And I say that as a faith leader and one who serves on the Mayor's Faith-Based and Interfaith Commissions. This is an area that we have to deal with as well. We lack relationship with a lot of these people, which is why we're constantly in search of trying to get young people infused in something, when truth be told, it should be second nature for us to be involved with young people. We should already have relationships with young people. So on the account of that, we do need support from council. We do need support from the city at large to continually fund these things. And as Reverend Holston said earlier, we need to do something different. Now, we're talking about the issues of racism, a lot of ways in which we see funding, and a lot of ways in which we deal and disperse funds is through a systemic, honestly, a systemic white business outline. We are asking these organizations and constantly coming to these organizations, and we utilize a word such as capacity to almost, deter people who are really grassroots, who are doing this work. So we kind of politicize the idea of what grassroots organizations look like. But guess what? Doing something new, doing something different is bringing different people in these rooms, having these conversations. Doing something different is making that transition and that shift of power. Doing something different is truly investigating. When we talk about people and talking about who's credible, who has reach, who has this, doing something different is truly investigating. How many people do these people actually reach? And I'm not talking about city council, and I'm sure some of y'all have caught on, but I'm not talking about like come around to the one-shot big event that looks good when we have, 200 people from the community, we're giving free stuff away. But I'm talking about on the continual day-to-day operations, so where we're not sitting here gerrymandering or fabricating our clipboard numbers, but showing actionable items and showing tangible work. That is something that we have to do. That's doing something different. Drastically, aggressively funding new faces and new voices who really not only are credible, but have influence and have the acumen to really build up and train our young brothers and sisters out here to actually do something different. And I think that those things we have to do at some point, because for a long time, it's been the same old game, same old names. And then what we see behind the scenes or the backdoor scenes, we see some of the same old names reaching out to some of these younger folks, trying to go ahead and do what they can do, to go ahead and see what they can do, to go ahead and, as Daoud was saying, include certain things in their outlines. And some of those guys that we talk about that are on the grounds, they stay on the grounds and they stay in the shadows because, quite frankly, they continue to still keep grinding and doing the work. And quite frankly, council can help them build the capacity. You help them build the capacity by, again, doing something different, by aggressively funding them so that they can utilize funds to actually create the capacity. It's just like the single mom who's overworked and overburdened. If she's out there working 60, 70 hours a week, we can't keep putting the onus on her to basically tell her pull up her bootstraps and raise her child while she's still trying to provide for her 3, 4 children. You can't keep doing that to grassroots organizations or grassroots leaders and say you lack capacity, but you lack funding, because people need funding to go ahead and work those jobs that a grassroots leader is sitting here doing, wearing 7 different hats. That's a lot to ask for while they're still doing the work, and then ultimately they suffer from burnout. And then we find ourselves in the meat of these same issues saying, why aren't things changing? Well, quite frankly, those who are living like fat cows from ivory towers are staying where they are, and they're not being challenged to have to do more. I saw, and I'll say this last thing and I'll shut up, and I love everybody here, by the way, but I saw a youth empowered agenda that recently featured people who truly cannot bring you more than 15 youth if you ask them to in a drop of a dime. That's problematic. When I had youth asking me, Pastor, who are these people and what youth are they talking to? I'm just being realistic because I don't know no other way to be. But in order for us to do something different, we have to make sure that we're really empowering our youth, really making sure that they have the voice to set their agenda. Because we have to make this stuff palatable for them. We have to present it to them in a different way. We have to make sure that they truly desire what it is that we're setting for them, as opposed to us setting parameters in an outline and telling them, here, you fill this box. And I'm just saying it because, guess what? With funding and without funding, I'm going to do what I continue to do for the last 10 years because I'm called to it. And that's where I stand. Thank you for your time. Thank you, Councilman Derek, for having me and everyone else.
Thank you for your testimony. Mr. Little, if you're available, please state your name for the record. While we're waiting on Mr. Little, Pastor Day, I'd like to just ask you a quick question. I believe we're coming to the end of this hearing. We'll have ongoing hearings regarding this topic. You talked about entrepreneurship and how you're able to take young people from various different perspectives and put them on a path of entrepreneurship. You said home health, you said barber, you said a whole host of different industries. And if you could provide just a little more detail on how you were able to do that, because that's really the crux of what we're talking about today. How do we take young people, just people in general, who we're trying to steer them from one direction and steer them into a different direction regarding entrepreneurship. And if we can grow more and more entrepreneurs, grow more and more businesses, to me, that's another anti-violence strategy, but also it is an economic development and empowerment strategy for the city of Philadelphia. That if you think we have more businesses on Washington Lane, Washington Avenue, in King Sessing or Winfield or Brewerytown or Feltonville, you name the community, any of those commercial corridors, that's going to provide more resources in that community, more dollars that can circulate in that community. And it goes back to the conversation that we started with in reference to Tulsa and Greenwood. We have more and more merchants who are in those communities, and entrepreneurs and others, to circulate more resources and also expose other young people to follow the path of the same people you talked about, that you mentioned, into entrepreneurship.
Great question, Councilman. So one thing that I think Councilwoman Jim and Erica Atwood made those statements about, like that bridge, that person who needs to go out and somewhat be a recruiter, because there is a nuance in between that, where there's not just this handoff. Okay, you're ready for a job, now go get a job. You're ready for entrepreneurship, now just go start a business. One of the things that I've done, we've taken and created programs in place where we met with men. And we ran a program from real to righteousness, because oftentimes our men would talk about keeping things real. And we're like, nah, nothing is real. Righteousness is real. Like, let us move righteously. Keeping it real is a facade, just like the streets is, just like the street code just ended up being a myth because it's no longer operable at all. With that, we would teach men pretty much life skills that transition into entrepreneurship, because there are different work ethics and patterns you need as a man and a woman to excel in entrepreneurship. One thing that I usually or typically would teach our men is, even while you got the job, learn to make the job work for you. If you're coming into work with a goal instead of being disgruntled, you understand that you're here for a set amount of hours and you're utilizing the funds that you're making to incorporate it into your business that you want to eventually ultimately build. Then you also have to be willing and make that constant decision to say that I'm going to work outside of work. So I taught our brothers how to work outside of work. You still can't say I did 8 hours and let me go home and lay down. You're not ready to run a business. In the midst of that, you need capital, but you also know you can't continue to get the capital or try to utilize the capital from the streets, because the streets isn't a consistent stream of capital, because those things can change at any given moment. So what you need to do is utilize the job to now invest in your business, but also be a student of the game, because just because you have a gift don't mean you're good at actually running a business. There's a marketing aspect of business. So we had book selection readings. We would go through these books. We would spend time with these brothers. We would go ahead and make sure that those brothers were setting budgets and allocating money that they would go ahead and save, rather than spend their money foolishly or frivolously. They would go ahead and put it up into their business. We've also ran Shark Tanks for our youth as well. What I did was we did a Shark Tank right before the COVID. We took 20 proposals, and they had to set business proposals. We had a panel, and I had a panel of a few other investors and a couple other community organizers. And we sat there and we actually allowed the youth, we allowed my teams to present proposals. The top 5 proposals got $1,500 to start their business. All of this was grassroots funded, by the way. We raised this money, So we went ahead and gave the top 5 business proposals $1,500 to start their business. A couple of the kids, one of the kids started his own car wash, where he bought his own power washer, bought his own supplies, everything else. A couple other kids started their own clothing line, and another kid started his own YouTube streaming channel, in which he did in correlation to his gaming. So he took his money and actually built his gaming computer up so that he can go ahead and get on Twitch and run his gaming account. This is what this kid did. So all of those ways in which we've made entrepreneurship a reality, because there still had to be a process into where in which they had to unlearn, other unhealthy practices that would pretty much make you a failed entrepreneur if you jumped out there and did business. Also, your customer service, your people skills can't stink. So this is things that, we had to show brothers and show. You can't talk to them like how you might talk to an addict that you're giving drugs to. You got to be able to deal with people and understand that there's an essence and a nature that you got to carry and conduct yourself with. So in those things, like I said, man, we help youth start businesses, but we also help brothers start a mobile detailing business. Broke down the nuances of that, buying a van, gutting it out, buying a gallon, 30-gallon water tank, and doing what he had to do, setting up his clientele, utilizing, other internet services to where people can, how to run his ads online. Those are things that we did with people. But again, I think it really started for us with drawing it up on whiteboards, laying out that plan, understanding costs, but then also, like I said, them getting on board and being committed to saying, okay, I really want to transform the way that I think and approach things so that I can truly thrive as an entrepreneur. And I mean, I can have some of those men speak for themselves as well during a separate time.
Thank you for that testimony. I want to tee up Mr. Will Little, who's the last person speaking on this panel. But Pastor Day, what you talked about, I think, really captures a lot of the conversation we are having today. You know, earlier, Ms. Atwood talked about hustle skills, and then you kind of talked about that exact same thing and how that young man and others took those hustle skills and transformed that into an entrepreneurial activity. That's why, you know, the last panel I was talking with Mr. Carter from the Chamber of Commerce, that both sides need to hear that. So if you have a representative, and I know the vast people at Comcast, that is here and hearing some of the things you're talking about, that's that type of interconnection that people need to know about, that you have a person like yourself who's been able to help have a Shark Tank type of activity, and a young person took that, used it to create their own channel through Twitch. Those are the same type of skills that someone at a Comcast is trying to do more, developing more in a creative space and trying to have more people that are influencers in that space needs to hear. And there's a whole host of other opportunities and applications to that. That's why having this kind of connection where, you know, members of the business community and individuals like yourself and Mr. Bay and Ms. Fayum and others can have that type of conversation, at least to hear from each other, to get that perspective of the possibility, which then can lead to other types of engagements and conversations going forward. With that, I'm going to thank you, Pastor Dave, for your testimony. I would also like to open it up for any other people who are on the call from the public who would like to testify regarding this resolution.
If I could, right quick, Derek, just to double down on something that Pastor Day was saying.
Yes, and Mr. Bay, if you just state your name again for the record, so for the stenographer.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. My name is Daoud Bey. Put it down. I just wanted to double down on something that Pastor Day was saying in regards to the lies that the streets tell our youth, because culturally we have to get them to see how this stuff is sexy and it's cool and it's okay to be a part of what we're talking about, you know. And one of the things that we're going to do is called demystifying the codes of the streets, because the streets is a myth on what is cool and what's all right, and it ain't never been cool. So it's like, it's important that guys like us begin to start having those type of conversations. I wish Will was here, because he also is a pivotal part in helping them change their mindset with emotional intelligence, because that's something that Will Little teach. He's down there with us in South Philly. So I just wanted to kind of like give him a shout out with that and let y'all know that we're all working together collectively from the mental aspect as well, to try to figure out how we can change the cultural thinking of our youth. You know, so one of the things that like we think about is how do we make that transition cool? So we got a thing that we call buy back the block, where we would begin to use real estate as a means to reduce gun violence. You know, because if a lot of guys that come from the streets, as you know, Pastor Day, they good with being and getting involved with real estate and in construction and things like that, because it still keeps a sense of coolness to it. It's accepted. So with the Buy Back the Block program, it's not just that we just going to give guys grant money to get involved with real estate. They first have to be a part of another program that we have a full curriculum on, that's called You're Up, Urban Roots Unite Partners, where we basically teach kids how to become developers. And they know everything about purchasing real estate, zoning requirements, zoning analysis, everything from start to finish from a developer side. And then they also would get the project management side. And the project management side is the construction costs and things to that extent. And once they complete that program, this is where the city could be more involved with a lot of these city-owned properties that's just sitting there, not collecting any taxes and so forth and so on. And we are of the mindset that if we reduce gun violence by at least 10%, the property value go up 2.3%. But if we get these guys involved and get them involved in something you were saying, Councilman Derek, But the key is getting them involved with the ownership of these communities. Because one of the things about Europe as a developer, I'm gonna take an apprentice. I own a development. I'm doing 18 units on North Broad Street. I'm gonna take an apprentice. He's going to get ownership of that development. It's small, but it's an incentive for him, and he's going to get paid throughout the project for him to sit there and see every phase of the project. So as developers, we're going to use this type of curriculum ourselves with our own projects that we're doing. But this is a way that we can get the city more involved and get these guys involved with the ownership of their community, because they feeling boxed out when we talk about gentrification, when we talk about redlining. You understand? And when you talk about survival in general, poverty. So where there's poverty and there's a sense of survival, you do anything to survive by any means necessary. They hear. They don't even know that terminology, how that affected a lot of people, back in the day. But at the same time, we got to realize when people in the mood of survival, they're hurt people. So we got to get them involved with the ownership, because they're being pushed out of their communities. And I see it in South Philly to the point that they all on my step where my office is at. They can't sit on the other people's steps that's owned by Asians and white folks no more, because they being boxed out. They don't even own no property in the community. They being pushed out to Southwest, but they from South Philly. So, and then that's why you got all these clashes, because gentrification is pushing people into neighborhoods that they're not necessarily comfortable in, and then they clashing out there. So it's a very, a lot of different variables to exactly what we see and how we see in all these various different clashes that we got to get involved. But we got to get these kids involved with ownership of our community. And so now when you see the BIA and you see all these developers coming through with thousands and thousands of units that they grade come into our communities, make sure that we have community packages that's together that tells these developers, look, man, if you're going to do these developments in our communities, especially if you're going to be using city-owned properties, then you have to make sure that you have diversity and inclusion. Diversity on the construction level, diversity on the ownership level is an opportunity for the leadership, council leadership, to hold these developers accountable for y'all to create more funding from the private side to help these type of programs. Because I'm a member of the BIA, and they coming through. I had Kenyatta on the phone with them. They coming through with 1,000 affordable houses within the next 2 years. But how many market rate units they coming with? 10,000. So as they come in with these big plans into our communities, I see my brother Will, and then I'm gonna close out now. But when we see all of these developments coming into our communities, as council members, these are the opportunities to create funding. Simple, easy. They're going to give it up. The RCO, registered community organization, be sticking them up for 200 grand, 50 grand, or whatever money that they want. So as council, if you use your authority, there's multiple different ways that we can continue to get more funding that we need for more non-traditional ways to help reduce gun violence. Will Littles, we missing you here as it relates to your emotional intelligence. Is very needed.
So,
Mr. How everybody doing? Great.
Mr. Bay and Mr. Little, give me one moment, and I'll bring you on next. Mr. Bay, thank you for that. And I think what you're talking about is very important, especially considering a number of different organizations, especially from the African American community, who are talking about real estate development from the collective. I know there's an African American developers group that's affiliated with the BIA. There's a number of different organizations, but it brings me back to something I've stated before in this body. For those who've seen the film Concrete Cowboy, one of the main characters is a young man by the name of Smush. And if you saw the movie, you know that this young man was part of that cowboy culture, but at one point was veered to a different path. But in doing that, he was on a different path and engaging in an activity that was illegal because he was selling drugs, but he was doing it as a way of funding capital so he can go into the real estate business. And he had a very clear, specific plan about buying real estate, properties. So he had the vision of how he was going to go into a legitimate real estate business enterprise, but the only way he knew as a way of getting that capital was working on a corner. So he had a plan, and it wasn't just a made-up plan. I mean, he had his parcel, there's this property. So he had a specific plan. That ties right into what you're talking about, as well as what Pastor Dave was talking about, taking young men in particular and giving them that path and that exposure in order to go into those areas of business and industry that can grow wealth and grow job opportunities and build up our communities. And with that, I'd like to bring in Mr. Will Little. If you could just state your name for the record for a stenographer and then proceed with your testimony. Being no other witnesses for this hearing, we'll conclude this hearing with Mr. Little's testimony, unless there's any other questions from members of council.
Okay, thank you. Will Lateef Little here. Sorry, guys, I'm late. I'm just chiming into it, to this conversation. But yeah, I think in order for us to create a safer city, it has to be a top-down, bottom-up approach, which we do in most businesses. They have a top-down, bottom-up approach, where as though they can scale their businesses to a point where as though they're hiring the right people to work for their companies to get the right results they're looking for. The same thing the city needs as well. The city needs to hire people who they know can get the results they're looking for. And because we're dealing with a traumatized community, one of the main things that we're dealing with are people's emotions. Like Bilal spoke to a lot, to all these arguments coming from what? Raw emotions. A lot of conflict coming from not understanding how to conversate or communicate those feelings to as well, to whoever it may be, your spouse or your neighbor or your co-worker or somebody in traffic. So we know that this community has been impacted by trauma deeply because of how many homicides in the last 4 or 5 years that affected at least 50 members per family and friends. And you just times that by last year's number, 499 times 50, just in 1 year during COVID. So, the trauma impact is very, very major. And the only way, even with me being a kid, being affected with the loss of a good friend of mine, I was impacted by that trauma too as well. And it impacted me because I didn't know how to deal with it. Only way I know how to deal with it is not being the next victim. And this is the mentality that we have in our community today, especially with all these revenge murders. So one of the things that's very important, which I've been teaching basically all over the country, and more so now in the city of Philadelphia, even just doing one-on-one coaching with individuals who are willing to get the help they really need. They can't go to a psychiatrist. They mostly come to me and hire me to do a one-on-one session with them on emotional intelligence, on personal development. Because regardless of what we're doing in our life, our personal development is attached to everything we do. I don't care if it's business, I don't care if it's jobs, I don't care if it's a relationship with your friends and family or your spouse. Your personal development has everything to do with that. And the more we understand how we can more personally develop, heal ourselves from whatever trauma we experience, look within ourselves to find the resources, right? The resources that we have within ourselves in order for us to continue with growth, not just coming out of a program or not just coming from an event or a session, but how to continue sustainability when it comes to personal growth, right? And this is things that I've been teaching in this community for the last 2 years, but even way before that. But when I got really in contact with emotional intelligence, I knew that this was the key in order for us to really be able to create a safer city, for one, and to help people feel good about themselves. You know what I'm saying? And continue to see a vision of life for themselves, that they can do better in life, opposed to thinking they're not going to live past 20 or 21 years old, or that they're 35 and 40, that is over for them at this time and age. So it's just creating a new insight, a new awareness, and also of how to actually manage those raw emotions when anytime you come in contact with some kind of conflict, especially the conflict within yourself. Because now it's more so, how do we develop? It's hard for us to develop relationships with other people because a lot of us don't have relationships with ourselves. And when you begin to develop a relationship with yourself, you understand how to build relationships with other people. And this is the information that we're missing. We're missing it in our schools, we're missing it in our prisons, we're missing it in our rec centers, because these are captive audiences. whereas though we can put the information in, we can put the curriculum in, whereas though our people in our community can get the knowledge they need in order to help them scale their own personal business, the business of self. And that's my testimony today. So I'm trying to share this information more out there with City Council. Also, I talked to Marskula, who just attended my event, as well as Bilal did, and Kenyatta, about me doing another presentation to the council, because I did one 2 years ago, which only 2 council members showed up. There was Marskula and Kenyatta Johnson, but most of the staff of those particular council members showed up, and all of them wanted to be trained because they knew the need of it, because they got the help they needed personally in their life right there and there in those 2 hours. So we know the importance of emotional intelligence. That's all I want to share.
Mr. Little, thank you for taking a few moments to testify. I'm definitely looking forward to that opportunity coming to council. But I think you spoke to something that was very important as part of this whole conversation in reference to not talking about emotional intelligence, but also a value and self-worth, which ties directly to entrepreneurship. And when we go back to the original conversation, we talked about the Greenwood section of Tulsa, because of the sense of pride of that community and the pride of starting your own type of business, that you've been able to start a business or start some economic development or have a job and being able to provide for your family or your community, that provides that type of empowerment and self-fulfillment that can also resonate to others. And I think it's that type of environment, that type of perspective that's so important, that comes out of having the ability to grow economic development and grow wealth and grow entrepreneurship, because that is transferable not only for yourself, but also your family and your community. And that's another aspect that is lost when we talk about this interplay between gun violence and public safety and some of the systemic racism that Mr. Kwame talked about and others talked about, as well as the economic development aspect and the entrepreneurship that we're talking about. So definitely looking forward to hearing about the opportunity where myself, other members of council, and others can participate and learn from the work that you're doing. I want to thank all of the people that came out this morning to testify. This is the first step of this conversation. Just from today's conversation, I developed a wealth of ideas that we can continue to engage throughout the summer. Also, as I stated at the beginning of this testimony, we've reached out to various parties from both Annie Casey as well as the Pew Charitable Trust to provide some more academic information regarding the connection between gun violence and economic development, but also want to continue to engage in this conversation as well. We can make sure that people know about the opportunities from the work that Pat Clancy talked about from Philadelphia Works, from the work that Erica Atwood talked about, from the work that Michael Rashid talked about, to make sure that information is getting to the Will Littles, Dabu Days, and the Bilal Quayums, and the Eric Williams, and the Pastor Days, so that way they have the information so that they know a young person interested in this opportunity or that opportunity or this, they know the abilities to make those connections in order to help that young person get on a path to self-fulfillment, engagement, and empowerment, as well as possibly entrepreneurship. So with that, I want to thank all of you for being here this afternoon.
Yep. Councilmember Green, can I just add one comment?
Yes, I believe that was Councilmember Squilla. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and then Chairman Johnson also. This has really been an important meeting, and as you listen, we still listen and learn, and it's great to hear the people who really give their time to testify, because everybody wants to help. And when you hear from folks like Bilal and Will, it's really important to understand that, you know, we as city government need to do more, right? It's not just the regular things that we've done in the past. It's new ideas and how we address those new ideas. And it's so true that, you know, until you learn to love yourself, it's hard to love others. And, you know, we as a society, sometimes we always want to put blame on people on why they're doing things, instead of looking to say how we can promote ourselves, how we can promote the people who are having these challenges. And, you know, whether it's a Father's Day rally or a gun buyback or that Bilal is so involved with and working with all the council members, or whether it's Will Little's be able to show individuals what it is that we're missing as people. And when I went through the training and understanding and listening, we sometimes as council members, want to think we have all the answers and we throw all this legislation at them. But sometimes we have to take a step back and listen. And when we listen and we learn. And I think these hearings, what you have done today, is give us an opportunity to listen and learn. And I just think that this is a one big step forward. Obviously, we have a long way to go. But listening and learning from our constituents, people who are in our city who really want to help make come up with a solution. And meet the people where they are is so important. So I will continue to work with you and Councilmember Johnson, all members of council, but not only that, but all the organizations and people who are here to help testify and help us, guide us in a direction that's really going to make a difference. So thank you for that, and thank everybody who testifying, and we really appreciate it. And like we said earlier, this is just the first step. So thank you for giving us this opportunity.
Thank you, Councilmember Squilla. I also like to recognize Bilal Qayyum. I believe you had another comment, and I did also see, I believe I saw Ricky Duncan as well. I wasn't sure if he wanted to testify as a member of the public, but I did see his hand raised in the chat feature, and I believe he is on as well. So let's go with Mr. Qayyum, and then hopefully we can hear from Mr. Duncan as well. And then we'll conclude today's hearing.
Yes, Councilman Green. I just wanted to thank you and the committee and Councilman Johnson for today's hearing. As you know, when I approach you and other council folks about addressing this issue around white institutional racism and the effect of violence, and you came, you stepped forward and said, yes, let's do this. It's a different discussion around violence that we haven't had in the city of Philadelphia. But also the economic impact is a different discussion. And I'm a strong believer. I know the work that Will Little's doing about changing your mindset is all important. The work that Daoud Bey doing, the work that Pastor Carl Day is doing, and other individuals is great work in the city. But I also believe if we have a strong economic base in the Black community, we will see major changes, and particularly as it relates to violence and gunplay in the city of Philadelphia. More folks locked out of the system, not included, feel isolated, are the ones who could get more likely involved in responding to the daily pressures with violence. So it's a combination of things. It is really a combination of things. But I just wanted to thank you for allowing for the participants today and for your hosting the meeting. And also, I know you have mentioned that there would be follow-up, which is more important. I mean, we need solutions, not more conversations. As people know me, I'm always looking for the solution, and let's get the action moving. And I would just say this to the folks who might be still on from the government side and administration, is that we do need these solutions and we need to move them. There's enough talent in this city to solve this problem. It's no doubt in my mind. Just got to, like everybody's saying, from Michael Rashid to you and to Erica, we just got to connect the dots. Get everybody involved. And I'm confident and I'm very optimistic that we can see positive changes, but it's not going to be overnight. It's going to take a while. But I just, once again, thank you very much for hosting this meeting today.
Well, thank you, Ms. Qayyum, because it was through you the genesis of this idea truly germinated. And I think this goes back to my original comment of how, from your work, both with Father's Day Rally and other activities you've done over a number of decades regarding anti-violence, but also your work in economic development as in the city of Philadelphia also makes that connection that much stronger and tighter. I was looking for Mr. Duncan because I did see him on the chat.
I'm here.
Oh, you are here. Okay, thank you. If you could just state your name for the record, and then proceed with your testimony. And I believe he is the last person, because I did not see others that have signed up to testify. So please state your name for the record, and then proceed with your testimony.
Ricky Duncan, RBKEY DUNCAN, CEO and Executive Director of the NOMO Foundation, New Options, More Opportunity. I just want to, again, thank council for allowing the people to get a word in on what's taking place in our city of Philadelphia, which at an all-time high is violence, gun violence being in particular. And I'm pretty sure I'm late to the meeting because for some reason I didn't get the link in time to join the meeting, but someone's actually sent it through LinkedIn and allowed me to join it. So, but I'm pretty sure my comrades that's on the phone that spoke on everything that I would have spoke on, because we're all in a joint effort to combat the gun violence that's taking place in the city of Philadelphia right now today. And I also see some influential game changers that's also listed on the call. So I don't want to be redundant in my testimony. I just want to step in and thank you, but first apologize for my late attendance due to the fact that, like I said, I didn't have the link originally, but I do want to apologize for my late attendance. And just going by what I've heard as I entered the meeting, at the end of the meeting, everything they say sounds progressive, moving forward. And I would just testify to the fact that I hope that it's more moving than talking, because at the end of the day, I believe violence right now is at a state of emergency in the city of Philadelphia. I believe our youth is at risk and is most vulnerable that's taking place right now in the city of Philadelphia. So, like I said, I don't want to be redundant because I'm pretty sure, seeing the folks that's on this call, that everything that I would say has already been said. But again, I would like to just thank you for inviting me and putting this call together. And thank you, Bilal, for, as Councilman Green has said, was an influential person in putting this call together. That's all I had to say.
Well, Mr. Duncan, thank you. And actually, you don't need to apologize. I apologize to you that you did not have the information in a more timely fashion, but I want to thank you for endeavoring to get on this call and taking a few moments out of your day, considering the great work that you've been doing through your organization to address this issue. Definitely look forward to continuing engaging with you on this issue and making this connection between the anti-violence initiatives and also how we address systemic racism through the lens of economic opportunities, economic development, entrepreneurship, to really help to grow wealth, especially in the African American community and other marginalized communities here in the city of Philadelphia. Want to make sure that everyone that is here that would like to testify has had an opportunity to do so. Also, any of my colleagues on council who would like to make any additional comments regarding today's topics and questions. I just want to really just thank everyone for being here. I know we've been on this call for a few hours. And as I said in the beginning, so often we talk about these issues in various silos. Well, if you are a person that's addressing gun violence, public safety, this is your portfolio. Or if you're the person that works on economic development, entrepreneurship, this is your portfolio, or education or healthcare. And all of these issues are interconnected. That's why I just want to thank my colleague, Councilmember Johnson, and we've been working together on this issue, but also economic development issues with the Chamber of Commerce and others to try to create more opportunities in the city of Philadelphia. And I want to thank him for always engaging me on different issues and the work that he's doing, not only in his council district, but around the city of Philadelphia. And I will close with this. There being no further questions from members of the committee and no other witnesses testify, and I believe there's no one else present in this hearing whose name we have failed to call and wish to offer testimony on any of these bills being considered today. Hearing none, I just want to close today's hearing. Thank you for your participation and your attendance. We will continue this conversation and probably continue the conversation in a little different format, especially from the conversation that was started regarding the Chamber of Commerce and some of the other organizations. So we'll try to put that type of conversation together, as well as continue to push forward on different ways that we can help address this issue, especially as we are going through the final quarter of our budget process to address issues and the resources that some of you have talked about in today's hearing. Thank you all for being here. And at this point, I will close this hearing and we'll recess to the call of the chairs. Thank you very much for your time and attention, and also your participation on today's hearing.
Thank you very much, Council.